Mr. Speaker, we know that the issue of migration, Mr. Speaker, we know that the issue of migration is one of the single for the Guyanese out there. You go into the street and you ask them. You go into the street and you ask them. They are concerned, Mr. Speaker. They are concerned about the unchecked migration into our country. They are concerned. They are concerned about this phenomenon, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this phenomenon. And Mr. Speaker, the minister who is responsible for immigration, the minister for immigration, the minister who should be playing a leading role in the development of migration policy, came to migration policy, and uttered nary a word on this pressing issue. It is crucial. It is crucial the issues and the challenges posed, the issues and the challenges posed, because these continue to expose us to significant risks and undermine our national security and undermine our national integrity and our territorial integrity. Mr. Speaker, the minister with responsibility for immigration, the responsibility for number of particularly Venezuelan migrants in our country. And the reason is clear, Mr. Speaker. It is because they do not know. Mr. Speaker, it is obvious, painfully obvious, from the fact that the members had nothing to offer us as to how they will manage migration into this country, that they have lost control of the migrant situation. And they have put our country, Mr. Speaker, resultingly in clear and present danger, jeopardizing our security and our sovereignty. Mr. Speaker, to mitigate these risks and to protect the integrity of our nation, we must immediately, Mr. Speaker, immediately establish a mandatory migrant registration system. Mr. Speaker, this system will allow us to effectively monitor the movement of individuals entering our country, to track the duration of their stay, and to ensure that migration, particularly across our porous borders, particularly, Mr. Speaker, across our porous borders, that they are monitored, Mr. Speaker, and to ensure that the migration is done in a more orderly fashion. Mr. Speaker, it will enable us to prevent illegal entries and track potential threats, including foreign agents and fifth columnists. And you know, when we say this, the PPPC government likes to say that we are invoking fear in the people of Guyana, but no less a person than their national security advisor is on record as expressing the concern that we do not know who we are letting into the country, that there are military men of age in our country, and we have no way of tracking them and no way of knowing their whereabouts. This is not what we have said. This is what their national security advisor has said. Mr. Speaker, further, refugees and migrants must only be granted temporary status until they can return to their homelands with a clear and explicit provision against voting rights. I repeat, with a clear and explicit provision against voting rights. Guyanese citizenship must remain a privilege and not a pathway to manipulation or long-term instability. Mr. Speaker, it is unacceptable that the migration profile that the Honorable Member Todd launched in December of 2021 is to date incomplete. And he comes here and he does not offer any explanation to us for this untenable state of affairs. Mr. Speaker,
that is incomplete.
A migration profile is the cornerstone. It is the foundation upon which we will build a sound migration policy. Why are we harping on this, Mr. Speaker? Why is it that it is so important that we have a migration policy? Mr. Speaker, it was Juan Batista Alberdi who coined a particular phrase. He said, to govern is to populate. To govern is to populate. Mr. Speaker, and we as a nation have to be mindful that this paradigm is not being used against us, to our detriment by the deliberate injection of population into our Essequibo. Mr. Speaker, we must place emphasis on enhancing our military presence along the border, much like the coalition did with Operation Armadillo. Instead of having our military men and women in blue t-shirts cleaning the drains in the city. Mr. Speaker, we must address our minds to increasing government-led investment in the Essequibo. Mr. Speaker, to incentivize the settlement of Guyanese in that region, even as we combat the effects of climate change, etc., along our low coastal plain. Mr. Speaker, we in the coalition have a vision for the development of the Essequibo. It is not by accident, sir, that the townships of Bartica, of Letem, of Mabaruma, and Madhya were established between 2015 and 2018. We just didn't wake up one day and decided we were going to do it. It was a part of a deliberate strategy to ensure that we establish, Mr. Speaker, we didn't just wake up, economic and administrative hubs for the development and the population of the Essequibo, Mr. Speaker. This is what national development requires. Carefully thought out plans, carefully thought out policies, and the capacity to implement and to execute. Mr. Speaker, when you travel the length and breadth of this nation, like I said before, the people are concerned about the abysmal handling by this government of the migration crisis. There's no policy in place, Mr. Speaker, and they intend to put none in place. But you know, we are in the age of abbreviation and mnemonics, and I'm tempted to say that this is the PPPC, postponing practical policy continuously, Mr. Speaker, and placing people's concerns. That is who they are, Mr. Speaker. We on this side of the House will implement a Guyana and Guyanese first migration policy. I repeat, we will implement a Guyana and Guyanese first migration policy because our policy will put the needs and interests of Guyanese first, unapologetically, while we responsibly manage migration to benefit national development, including the supply of labor, and while we emphasize protecting our local opportunities, preserving our cultural identity, and ensuring sustainable growth. Mr. Speaker, directly related to the ongoing this ongoing migration issue, is this issue of the Guyana-Venezuela controversy. Mr. Speaker, we in the parliamentary opposition have been unequivocal in our condemnation of the recent actions by the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, which include, Mr. Speaker, the completion of a bridge to Ancocco Island and the announcement of plans to elect a governor to administer the Essequibo region. Mr. Speaker, these actions constitute a dangerous escalation of aggression that cannot go unchallenged. We must now move, Mr. Speaker, beyond the lodging of formal protests to more proactive and decisive action. We on this side of the House are on record as making a number of recommendations to the PPPC administration, including the full mobilization of our diplomatic apparatus to secure continued international support, and that apparatus will emphasize the justness and the rightness of our cause. We continue to stress the importance of a robust international public relations campaign, and of course the engagement of the Guyanese diaspora in advocating for our sovereignty. Mr. Speaker, we have called for the establishment of a Border Security Commission and the establishment of a Foreign Relations Council. Our calls, Mr. Speaker, including calls to the convening of regular meetings of the Foreign Relations Sectoral Committee, continue to fall on deaf ears. Mr. Speaker, despite the Minister of Foreign Affairs having the temerity to stand in this House and to say they did not inherit any foreign policy from the AP and UFC coalition. We see foreign policy in action, Mr. Speaker, because it is a fact, sir, that it is under the David Granger-led administration that this Guyana-Venezuela controversy was elevated to the ICJ with the full concurrence of the United Nations. Mr. Speaker, the one diplomatic endeavor that this government engaged in this regard, the Argyle Declaration, turned out to be a disaster, with an entire government being duped, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker,
You heard Mr. McCoy?
Mr. Speaker, may I continue? I was saying, Mr. Speaker, I was reiterating the fact that the Argyle Declaration turned out to be a colossal diplomatic failure. And you know what? I expect that the honorable members are going to come to say, oh, you know, on this issue we must stand united. But I will say to them, if you come to this house and you tell the truth, we will support you. But if you don't, we will answer you accordingly. And as we are on failures, Mr. Speaker, the ban on catfish is still yet to be lifted. Mr. Speaker, Guyanese fisherfolk, honorable member, are still waiting on the 150 SC license from Suriname. Failure upon failure upon failure, Mr. Speaker. But this is the PPPC. They parade as if they know policy, but they're proven clueless. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk to us about CARICOM. I want to talk to us about CARICOM in relation to this, because the silence of CARICOM in this regard has been deafening. Mr. Speaker, the silence is not just deafening, it is disappointing. It is dangerous. It sends the wrong signal, not only to Venezuela, but to the world, that aggression could be met with apathy. Mr. Speaker, traditionally, CARICOM has been our first line of defense, and that line simply is not holding. Mr. Speaker, after much fanfare about the now obviously dead Argyle Declaration, the voices of key CARICOM leaders are deafeningly silent. Mr. Speaker, but I am sure that we will hear from them again at elections time. But they appear muted now in the face of Venezuela's ongoing aggression. Mr. Speaker, I want to be clear. CARICOM's inaction undermines its credibility, and it fails to uphold its collective commitment, Mr. Speaker, to upholding the sovereignty of its member states. The Essequibo is not just a Guyanese issue, it's a CARICOM issue. And Mr. Speaker, it is time that CARICOM step up, that they speak out, and that they demonstrate that they will not tolerate the violation of our sovereignty and our territorial integrity. Anything less is an abdication of their responsibility. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk to us about our diplomatic representation, because key diplomatic representation overseas. The honorable member should have been able to tell this House how he and his government will ensure that Guyana is represented by a professional cadre of diplomats. He should have been able to tell this House what plans are in place to appoint younger career diplomats in our embassies in Brasilia, Caracas, Paramaribo, Mr. Speaker, and Washington. I repeat, you should be able to tell us what plans are in place to appoint younger career diplomats to these posts that I have called. Mr. Speaker, I am by no means ageist, but Mr. Speaker, we must have a plan to ensure continuity and competence. Mr. Speaker, Guyana remains seriously underrepresented in Africa, with one diplomatic mission in South Africa. Mr. Speaker, by comparison, Venezuela has 20. By comparison. Mr. Speaker, I heard the ministers boast Mr. Speaker, that this year Guyana will be hosting a retreat of the African group. Well, I expect that for this $10 billion that we're giving him this year, that we will have an announcement of cooperation agreements, that we will hear about the establishment of more embassies and missions in Africa, and that they will be honest, Mr. Speaker, with the Africans about the number of Nigerian and other African students who have a difficulty getting visas on arrival here and who they refuse to renew their work permits, Mr. Speaker, because we are going to be here and we will let them know. Mr. Speaker, Minister Todd must tell us how much of this $10 billion he is putting to the Foreign Services Institute, Mr. Speaker, and I apologize to the people of Guyana that I have to shout, but my colleague on the other side has descended this August house into a fish market, Mr. Speaker. But I want Mr. Todd to know you can't outshout me, you can't intimidate me, and I will speak and you will listen. Mr. Speaker, he must tell us how much of this $10 billion that he wants will be going to the Foreign Services Institute to train young diplomats. And what arrangements has he put in place to mentor the next generation of diplomats? I suspect, Mr. Speaker, the reality is that he has very little money put aside for that. Because you know why? Traditionally, this PPPC government has always been about jobs for their cronies. Diplomatic postings have always been reward for favors granted. Mr. Speaker, it has always been jobs for the boys. Mr. Speaker, this is the classic PPPC when it comes to representing our country. Mr. Speaker, I could say that they are placing patrons in prestigious capitals. Mr. Speaker, I could say that they are only promising posts to party connections. That is the name and nature of the PPPC. Mr. Speaker, the foreign policy failure of the PPPC administration leaves us more vulnerable than we ever have been before. And Mr. Speaker, I will say this. They have left us more vulnerable than ever before to these raging foreign policy winds, Mr. Speaker, these raging geopolitical winds. Mr. Speaker, the PPPC believes, Mr. Speaker, that diplomacy looks a certain way. But I want them to understand that diplomacy is more than 2-minute calls between heads of state. It is more than convenient photo ops and the reveling in feel-good photo ops. It is more than that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stood in this spot last year, Mr. Speaker, and I outlined 5 developmental priorities for our foreign relations. Mr. Speaker, he took none of them on board. I will once again ask, in the interest of the people of Guyana, and in the interest of time, because time is of the essence, that the honorable member take those 5 urgent priorities and begin to implement them in the short time that he has left. We will continue it when we assume office. Mr. Speaker, I will now move to my general comments on the budget. I believe that I've given the foreign minister enough homework for the day. And I will now move to making some general comments on this 2025 budget. You know, when I read the budget, Mr. Speaker, I was like, here we go again. My first thought, here we go again. Budgeting more than we need, spending more than we have, shortchanging the next generation by raiding the NRF. Mr. Speaker, here we are again, not managing the efficiency gap, not developing our capacity to execute projects. It's the same old story, Mr. Speaker. Not learning from the lessons of states who have gone before us. Not intent on helping our people and this nation avoid the Dutch disease. I want to be clear, Mr. Speaker. We are always happy when the people of Guyana receive increases in the old age pension. We are always happy when they receive increases in public assistance and disability allowances and education cash grants. But let us be clear, Mr. Speaker, those handouts tackle the symptoms of the problem and not the problem itself. Mr. Speaker, reducing poverty will require long-term structural economic reforms, and it is hard work that the PPP refuses to do. Mr. Speaker, the government comes to this National Assembly and they tell us year after year about the astronomical sums they have expended. Mr. Speaker, yet let's ask the Guyanese, public, how has your life improved? Let's look at the sectors, Mr. Speaker. Let's look at health. Billions upon billions of dollars expended, yet we still have no Panadol in the local clinics, yet we still have 2 expectant mothers sharing beds, yet we still have rats, roaches, snakes, caiman infesting our hospitals. You wonder if it's a hospital or if it's being converted into a zoo. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about education. We spend billions and billions on education, yet when you check the stats, we still have one of the lowest literacy rates, Mr. Speaker, and our performances in maths and English continue to decline. Mr. Speaker, they boast about spending billions on school feeding programs, but the numbers are showing that malnourished children, the numbers are increasing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let us talk about water. It is no secret that the supply of water has degenerated, both in terms of supply and in quality. You only have to go on social media to see the graphics and the videos of people that stink water, the organic material coming out of the yard, out of their taps in their yards. And then perhaps the biggest admission of failure on it, a certain minister is in the media handing out black tanks because the water coming but it's not going in.
Yes. That is for me. The water coming but not going in.
The water coming but it's not going in. Mr. Speaker, let us look at electricity. 2 power ships, 17 generators from Honduras later, 1 stalled gas to energy project, and more than $100 billion later, and Guyanese still have blackouts every day. And based on the fact that the Honorable Ashni Kumar Singh stood in this house and told us that he's taking VAT off of generators, it means that we could expect more blackouts. Let's talk about these billions, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about agriculture. My dear friend Zulfi, honorable member, over $300 billion expended, but yet the studies are showing that over 40% of Guyanese are still food insecure. And we have he who will not be named that parades himself as the champion of food security in the region. We keep saying you gotta dance a yard before you dance abroad. Ensure that your people are first food secure. And then you could worry about everybody else. But Mr. Speaker, something is wrong. Something is wrong, Mr. Speaker. When a government comes to this house and tells us that they're spending more money every year, and yet year after year the lives of Guyanese are getting harder. Mr. Speaker, how can a country that is earning 7.6 million US dollars per day, 7.6 million US dollars per day, Mr. Speaker, and yet our children are going to bed hungry. Yet parents have to think about how they're going to make ends meet. Yet, Mr. Speaker, the capital city is filthy. Our roads are chaotic. We cannot get a full day of electricity supply without blackouts plaguing us. Our health centers lack the most basic drugs and medical equipment. Mr. Speaker, something is wrong. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I heard my colleagues on the other side making a big to-do about peace and prosperity and progress and commitment, Mr. Speaker, when the truth is that the only people who are progressing are the friends, family, and favorites of the PPC. The only peace that the people of Guyana know, Mr. Speaker, is the peace that passes all understanding that they get from on high, and certainly not from Robeson Ben, Honorable Member, and the police force that is in shambles, Mr. Speaker, when the only things that are prospering is the weapons of incompetence and mismanagement that this PPPC government continues to form against the people of Guyana. And when the only commitment that they have is to pilfering the patrimony of our people continuously. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member Rodriguez challenged us to say, what project should we cut? Mr. Speaker, any member of the public who follows the news will hear the announcement of all kinds of projects coming out of Freedom House on a Thursday. So, Honorable Member, how about we don't right now build, Mr. Speaker, a second bridge over the Berbice River when the first one is not even operating at half of its capacity. Mr. Speaker, how about we hold off another airport terminal when, Mr. Speaker, we have not yet completed this one and we have not yet exceeded its capacity? How about, Mr. Speaker, we nix this second gas-to-energy project that the Vice President seems very gung-ho about, and we make sure that we get the first one right first? Mr. Speaker, how about we stop pouring concrete into every median on every public road that we could find, Mr. Speaker, when in any developing country, with any government, with any type of foresight, knows that properly landscaped medians help in flood control, they help in controlling noise pollution, and they help in reducing, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member, I allowed you to go 3 minutes more because I didn't want to interrupt. Honorable Member, Mr. Mahipod?
No, Ms.
Honorable
Ferguson.
Member, Ms. Ferguson?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like for my colleague to be given 5 minutes more to conclude her presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Member, you have 5 minutes to conclude.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you. So, Mr. Speaker, I want the Honorable Minister Rodriguez to tell us, how about we nix these things? And then I can't leave out my friend, the Honorable Attorney General, who says to us, Mr. Speaker, that you only need feasibility studies when let me quote him correctly, that feasibility studies are not needed when something appears obviously feasible. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Attorney General should know that's the approach you take when you're doing a project in your backyard. This is not your backyard. This is the nation of Guyana, and we require that projects have feasibility studies, Mr. Speaker. But in keeping with the mnemonics, Mr. Speaker, this is the PPPC. Poorly planned projects continuously. Mr. Speaker, there's so much to say, but I will close by speaking to the people of Guyana. Because I want to be clear, Mr. Speaker. The government, any government, has a duty to provide infrastructure for its people. We must provide housing, we must provide roads for them to travel on, we must provide hospital and clinics, we must provide schools, Mr. Speaker, we must provide water, and we must provide electricity. It is the duty of government, Mr. Speaker, and Guyanese should not have to beg for any of those things. It is our right, Mr. Speaker. For far too long, Guyanese have been trapped in a game of survival that demands that they trade their dignity for survival. Mr. Speaker, it is a game where venality thrives, where incompetence is rewarded over competence, and where untruthfulness is the currency of power. Mr. Speaker, it is a game of winner-take-all politics, where power is hoarded, and power hoards resources. They entrench division and they exploit their provisions and connections, whilst the other citizens must struggle to make ends meet. Mr. Speaker, it is a game where nepotism, brain drain, and distraction politics have become the norm, and they are now forcing citizens to turn a blind eye to injustice and to excesses just so that they could survive. Mr. Speaker, in the end, it is up to us as a nation and as a people to decide and to look at ourselves and to ask ourselves whether we want meaningful change. Do we want change, or do we just want our turn? Those are the questions that we have to ask ourselves as Guyanese, Mr. Speaker. Do we dare to dismantle this broken system, or are we content to replace it with a different set of beneficiaries? Mr. Speaker, do we strive to build a nation that prioritizes equity, transparency, and inclusion, or do we perpetuate a cycle of exclusion and division? Mr. Speaker, this is not about just ending the game. It is about rewriting this game and restoring dignity. You know, one of my favorite artists, Drake, said something. He said the game needs change and we must be the cashiers. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I will say we must make constitutional reform a top priority if we are going to change this broken game to one of fairness, integrity, and hope. Mr. Speaker, we must build a nation where competence is rewarded, where, Mr. Speaker, nepotism and venality are no longer tolerated, and we must build it into a game of inclusivity, where every citizen, Mr. Speaker, regardless of class, race, political affiliation, or gender, feels empowered to thrive. Mr. Speaker, this new game must champion innovation, and it must invest in our people, especially our youth, sir, to prevent the brain drain, Mr. Speaker, and inspire those who are abroad to return home. Mr. Speaker, it must foster leadership that serves rather than exploits. It must prioritize national unity over division and truth over propaganda, Mr. Speaker. Finally, I will say that ultimately, we must transform this game into a covenant, one built on trust, one built on accountability, and one that is built on a shared vision for Guyana, where our dignity is restored, where we don't have to be sycophants to thrive, and where a brighter future is not just a dream. And that is what we are committed to on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, because we understand, Mr. Speaker, in keeping with the demonics of the day, we understand that people need care. We understand that our communities, Mr. Speaker, we understand that we must protect our nation's communities. We understand, Mr. Speaker, that we must build a Guyana for all Guyanese, not for some. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, in spite of the hard work of the members of staff at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I cannot lend my support to this budget in its current iteration. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very, very much, Honorable Member. And now for the Honorable Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce, the Honorable Onage Walron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, may I please take this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to the Senior Minister within the Office of the President with responsibility for finance and his team for their dedication and hard work in preparing this budget that sees Guyanese securing a prosperous and sustainable future. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2025 comes as we approach the 5-year anniversary of the ascension of our government to office. And one cannot help but contrast the performance of the PPPC administration with that of our predecessors, who now occupy the other side of this honorable house. Mr. Speaker, unlike that of the other side, our record has been one of delivery. It has been a record of achievement, a record of competence in execution, and of promises kept. Mr. Speaker, I list in bemusement at our previous speaker, Ms. Amanza Walton Desir, honorable member, who has left, has decided not to give us the courtesy after standing up on their soapbox, throwing everything at the Guyanese people, everything onto the wall to see what will stick, stoking xenophobic sentiments, trying to create fear for the people with allegations that have no solutions, offering solutions to imagine ghosts and fears. Mr. Speaker, the truth is that most of the Venezuelans who are here are of Guyanese descent. That is the truth. That's correct. But, Mr. Speaker, I wish to speak to what is the undercurrent of the honorable member's presentation. The sounding brass and tinkling cymbals, vacuous, empty. And I wish, Mr. Speaker, for the people of Guyana, so when they take it down a notch, and there was a reason why I came and started at a level tone, because we need to take down the rhetoric a notch and listen to the substance. It is empty, vacuous, nothing there, Mr. Speaker. Nothing. Nothing of substance.
A lot of nothingness.
And some of these criticisms, Mr. Speaker, as the honorable member Desir has raised in the House and outside the House, tells us a story of who they really are. There's a reason why they have to come here and flay their hands and jump up on the table and do all of that. It is creating, you have to create a mirage as if we are doing something, because they've done nothing. They're trying to move themselves out of inertia, but it's not going to happen, Mr. Speaker. They have done nothing. They have no solutions. Nothing. So, Mr. Speaker, the honorable member, Amanza Desir, argues, like most of our colleagues have, that it's not reasonable to compare their performance under the APNU in 2015 to 2020, their performance without oil resources to our performance in the context of oil resources. And Mr. Speaker, I want us to take the time to delve into these kinds of arguments, because the Guyanese people deserve to hear truth, they deserve to hear well thought out arguments, and they deserve to hear substance. The honorable member this year said outside of the House, and I quote, "How much a government gives to its people, it's directly related to how much it has to give," and went on to say that our government has, and I quote, "unprecedented fiscal space." Fiscal space. This sounds plausible enough, on its face, Mr. Speaker. But let us examine this argument a little more closely. Mr. Speaker, before 2015, without even the prospect of oil resources within the fiscal space available, the PPPC government found the money to pay cash grants of $15,000 per year to school children. The APNU AFC came into office riding the wave of first oil discovery in 2015 and took that grant away. Mr. Speaker, without oil money or the anticipation of oil money, the PPPC government found the money to pay a 1-month bonus to the discipline services. The APNU AFC came into office and took that bonus away. Without oil resources, sir, the PPPC instituted subsidies on water bills for pensioners. The APNU took those subsidies away. Without oil resources, we found the money to subsidize electricity for pensioners, $30,000 per year. The APNU AFC took that subsidy away. To add insult to injury, sir, the APNU AFC, after removing all of those benefits, gave themselves a 50% rise in salary and told the people of Guyana that they had no apologies to make. So, Mr. Speaker, while the argument that they make that we have oil and they didn't may appear plausible on the surface, we did all these things without oil, and hence this examination of their record tells a different story. Know them by their deeds. So when the honorable member like Amanza Nazir comes and flays and pretends to be virtuous and they have all the answers, know them by their deeds. They have no credibility.
Know them by their deeds.
The honorable member Amanza Nazir tilted at the $10,000 health care voucher, which, as the minister responsible for finance says, is intended to cover a basic menu of medical tests. The honorable member says that this is nothing but a transfer to the private sector because one has to take the voucher to a private institution. Mr. Speaker, for the life of me, try as I might, I could not comprehend the logic in their criticism. Mr. Speaker, given that tests are free in the public health system, where else would a citizen take such a voucher? As far as I understand it, Mr. Speaker, no one has to do anything in respect of the medical care voucher. A member of the public can choose to have the test done in the public health system, in which case, as I said, it is free and no voucher is needed. If, however, a citizen chooses to access the private health care system for whatever reason, we are saying to that citizen, here we will defray some of that cost for you. It is the same way that the Because We Care cash grant is extended to every child, regardless of whether that child is in the public or private education system. But we don't hear the same criticism about the education grant, Mr. Speaker. Is it because they have a different perception of who education providers are than they have of medical service providers? And in any case, the opposition never concedes, or maybe they don't understand, that businesses have costs. They carry on as though every dollar of revenue constitutes a profit. For them, the medical service provider doesn't have to use supplies to conduct tests. They don't have to pay rent. They don't have overhead. They don't have to pay staff who work. No, if you listen to the opposition, every dollar of revenue that goes to the private sector goes straight into the pocket of some businessman or to the customer by magic. But this is the mentality of the opposition, Mr. Speaker. It is a zero-sum mentality. They can't conceive of public and private healthcare systems complementing each other, with each occupying an appropriate place in the national fabric. They want to take us back to the days where there was no private sector, where the state, according to them, must control the commanding heights of the economy, where the state dominated all aspects of people's lives, where the state, their state, did everything, and did it badly. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to thank the Honorable Member Jurita Finance, who opened the debate for the opposition last Friday. I think the Honorable Member did the nation a great service as well in her presentation. I say this, Mr. Speaker, in this context, the Honorable Member is amongst the new guard in the ranks of the opposition. She, like the Honorable Member Walton Desir, is of their new generation and represents the future of their party. So it is instructive for us to have a demonstration, sir, of where our friends in the opposition are headed, as illustrated by their best and brightest. Mr. Speaker, there is a Yiddish word which I think aptly describes the presentation of the Honorable Member, Ms. Finance. That word, sir, is chutzpah. Translated to English, means audacity or temerity. That word comes to mind, sir, because it is the height of audacity for someone who is part and parcel of a party that told people to go on the street corner and sell plant and chips and dog food to make a living, to come here and say in this honorable house that service jobs in the hospitality industry are beneath the dignity of Guyanese. Let me hasten to say, Mr. Speaker, that on this side of the house, we have absolutely no problem with people who sell dog food on the corner. They are doing honest work, and honest work is dignified work. So we don't have a single problem with those hardworking people, Mr. Speaker. What we have a problem with, sir, is the temerity of people like the Honorable Member Finance, whose government not only told Guyanese to go make their living selling on the street corner, but imposed a tax on top of them in the bargain. You will remember, sir, that huckster's tax as one of the more than 200 regressive taxes that this administration has removed. And then they come to this house disparaging jobs which offer steady employment, offer opportunities for advancement, as well as inclusion in the social safety net through the NIS scheme. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member, who is in the vanguard of the opposition's new generation, told us that tourism makes us a nation of servants. Mr. Speaker, this is the voice of the opposition's future, giving us the identical argument of the PNC from days past. So it appears, Mr. Speaker, that notwithstanding the new look, the new people, the new day, this new day, it's the same old tired philosophy on the other side. But we must thank the Honorable Member, Ms. Finance, for reminding us of who they are, because Guyanese will be making an important choice this year. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member's presentation last Friday was emblematic of the particularly insidious way in which the opposition tries to demonize the government and the private sector. What they do is focus on the biggest and most visible businesses, those businesses which by their very nature are in a position to make major investments. They then claim that the private sector only comprises these businesses, and then they say to their supporters, the government is giving all of the money to the private sector. And again, they represent the situation as though private sector revenues are one and the same as private sector profits. The Honorable Ms. Finance gave us a masterclass in this type of subterfuge last Friday, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member, in attempting to ridicule the thousands of jobs created in the hospitality sector, said that we are telling people to work in hotels that they can't afford to stay in. And after she was done in here, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member took to social media and posted the nightly rates of the top 3 hotels as if to make her point. Yes, the hashtag was "I said what I said." She doubled down. It moved me to make the point that the Honorable Member appears to have no understanding of the scope of the hospitality sector. I would invite the Honorable Member to take a trip to her hometown of Bartica and visit the 13 hotels operating there, one of which recently undertook an expansion. I would invite the Honorable Member to speak with those hotel owners and reconsider whether she wants to come to this house to disparage the hotel business. Mr. Speaker, as part of our evaluation of the hospitality sector, The Guyana Tourism Authority monitors 95 hotels located in almost every region of this country. 95, Mr. Speaker, 95. They talk about comparing oil and non-oil, but they don't find it utterly ridiculous to select the top 3 of almost 100 and hold them out as characterizing the sector. Mr. Speaker, of the 92 hotels that were surveyed in our monitoring program for 2024, 14 were in Region 2, 4 were in Region 3, 31 in Region 4, 11 in Region 6, 13 of them are in Region 7, where the honorable member hails from, 8 were in Region 9, and another 8 in Region 10. So, Mr. Speaker, the hospitality sector is much more diverse than the honorable member imagines. And for good measure, I would say that the average rates of hotels outside of the business sector are as low as $15 per night in Region 1, and with a national average in 2024 of $25,000 per night, a fraction of the rates that the honorable members choose to use to drive her narrative. And for the honorable members' information, Guyanese can and do patronize these establishments. By the way, Mr. Speaker, and by the way, many of these are small businesses, establishments with less than 25 rooms. I mention this because they also seem to have a coordinated message that we are doing nothing for small businesses. Mr. Speaker, I have to remind them that we brought into law the 20% window for small businesses in government procurement. That is how we could award over $25 billion to almost 2,500 small contractors, many of them first-time awardees and 30% of them women or women-owned. But to return to the hospitality sector, Mr. Speaker, I wish to make this final point. Close to 5 years ago, in the height of the worst pandemic the world has seen in a century, when global travel was at a virtual standstill, we had the vision to see beyond the horizon and recognize what Guyana could be in the future and what we would need to realize that potential. That is why, Mr. Speaker, back in 2020, even in those circumstances and in the context where we did not have a history and culture of tourism like our Caribbean states, we invited expressions of interest for the construction of hotels to carry major globally recognized brands. And if you recall, sir, we were wrongly criticized for doing so. We were criticized for facilitating investment in hotels when no one was traveling. And the criticism then was that we were building hotels that no one would stay in. Predictably, Mr. Speaker, the naysayers were proven wrong because in 2023, occupancy in the business segment was 85%. And 2024, the occupancy level in that segment was 88%. In the smallest segment of the sector, occupancy levels also increased. At these occupancy levels and average room rates reported for 2024, estimate of the sector revenues approached $65 million in 2024. That's over 13.6 billion Guyanese dollars. Collectively, Mr. Speaker, almost 22,000 people are employed directly or indirectly in the hospitality sector across the country. And so, Mr. Speaker, having been proven wrong in their dire predictions regarding economic viability of their industry, their position has now shifted that their new argument, as the Honorable Practice said, is that their work in the industry is unfit for Guyanese. There is no principle and no consistency in their argument, Mr. Speaker. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, because of our policies, the private sector has gained confidence and is responding with investment. For hotels, we have seen close to $35 billion of investment. Lodges have seen $21 million in investment. Resorts, $200 million. Local airlines, $600 million. Malls, $12 billion, with a total investment by the private sector of over $50 billion in the hospitality sector alone. Between 2020 and 2024, the industry added 4 new hotels and a total of 561 rooms to the national room stock. And when we say private sector, Mr. Speaker, I mean the private sector, including those small and medium businesses that the opposition doesn't see, because their existence doesn't suit their narrative. Mr. Speaker, of the 561 new rooms, 81 of those were in the segment of small operators, 35 in Henrietta, Region 2, 34 in Linden, Region 10, and 6 in Bartica, Region 7, home of the honorable member who says that hotel work is unworthy of Guyanese. And, Mr. Speaker, I should point out that these hotels employ people. They have managerial and supervisory staff, they have clerical staff, and they have operational staff. Many of these roles require 24-hour coverage. Thus, you may find 3 persons employed in 8-hour shifts to cover a role. So, Mr. Speaker, when you include ancillary service, I repeat, almost 22,000 people are employed in the hospitality sector. And this employment follows the more than 1,500 jobs that were created during the construction phase of these various facilities. We promised to create jobs, and we have surpassed our promise of 50,000 jobs for our people, Mr. Speaker. And in so doing, restored hope and dignity to the thousands of our Guyanese brothers and sisters the APNU AFC placed on the breadline. That's our record, competence and delivery. Mr. Speaker, we see the same playbook when it comes to the construction sector. They pick out the major contracts, designate those contractors as the private sector, and allege that all the money is awarded to them. But, Mr. Speaker, just over 3 months ago, on the 11th of October, on these very premises, I was here when we awarded 673 contracts to small contractors with a total value of $11.5 billion for building community roads and other infrastructure in Region 4. That exercise was preceded by one in October 8, 2024 in Berbice, where we awarded just about $7 billion for community works to 389 small contractors in Region 6. In Region 5, 108 small contractors were awarded $1.5 billion in contracts for upgrade of community roads. In April 2024, we awarded $1 billion in contracts in Sophia, right here in Georgetown, to persons from the community to upgrade roads and infrastructure. In Linden, 325 contracts totaling $4.2 billion were issued on November 23, 2024 to small contractors for the upgrade of community roads in that municipality. We followed up on December 3rd with additional 94 contracts in Linden, again issued to small contractors for road works, and another 46 contracts for drainage works. In total, Mr. Speaker, in 2024, well over 2,000 small contractors, ordinary people all over this country, were awarded over $27 billion in contracts to upgrade and enhance infrastructure in the communities. Mr. Speaker, and I speak only of the small business contracts awarded through the sector of public works. Many of these people are first-time contractors, and absent our deliberate policy of facilitation and community empowerment, they would not have had the opportunities that they do today. So it is incomprehensible, Mr. Speaker, that members on the other side can have the temerity to come to this honorable house and say with a straight face that our budgets have nothing in them for the ordinary average Guyanese. Mr. Speaker, I have made this point before, but it bears being made again. Every child who attends a public school and receives instruction gets a benefit from $175 billion that is programmed for education in this budget. Mr. Speaker, the thousands of people who go to a public hospital or a community health center and benefit from free care and treatment benefit from the $143 billion allocated to health in the budget. For small businesses who they say we do nothing for, the accelerated depreciation schedule for capital investments made by poultry farmers is nothing because small farmers mean nothing to them. The removal of VAT on agricultural machinery means nothing for them. I suppose they don't consider small farms to be small businesses.
They don't care.
Mr. Speaker, do small businesses not benefit from our maintaining the zero rating of excise tax on petroleum products? This measure removes an estimated $90 billion in costs throughout the supply chain And this benefits not only small businesses, Mr. Speaker, it benefits everyone. Lowering fuel costs lowers inland freight so as to reduce prices in the shops and markets. It lowers direct costs for consumers who own motor vehicles. Our taxi fares remain low in part because of that measure, and it lowers electricity costs, which every consumer and business benefits from in terms of lower light bills. Mr. Speaker, it is easy to do as the opposition does, to criticize these measures because they know that the true effect of these measures will only be felt if those subsidies are removed, and that will never be done by this government. But make no mistake, sir, they will remove those subsidies and place the burdens on the citizens' back if they ever get their hands on the levers of power again. Just look at their record.
That's correct, because that's what they do.
Mr. Speaker, there is 800 million program for small businesses in the agro-processing sector. This is in addition to the 3 billion program for facilities in Region 2, 3, 4, and 10 for small businesses operating in the light, medium, and processing industries. In Region 2, on the Naming Industrial Estate is 95% complete. I will be ready for rollout in the first quarter of 2025, offering 90 plots for prospective businesses. Development at the York Industrial Estate in Region 10 is progressing and is scheduled for completion in 2025. Mr. Speaker, these initiatives build upon our successes with the business incubators in Lethem and Belvedere, which gives me another chance to address the oil versus non-oil comparison argument. Mr. Speaker, you might recall that in August 2020, both locations, Lethem and Belvedere, were mere shells, despite representations by the AP and UAFC that they were in a position to begin operations. There was a public launch in Belvedere and an extensive media tour in Lethem, which included several business people from neighboring Brazil. But it was all a mirage, Mr. Speaker, a pretense, the kind of subterfuge that the AP and UAFC here, no equipment was installed, not a pod was occupied, and nothing was produced. Today, Mr. Speaker, residents of Region 6 and 9 have access to state-of-the-art agro-processing facilities which provide a direct benefit to the agro-processing sector. As a result, we have real production of value-added items which benefit the respective communities. Last year, Mr. Speaker, more than 8,000 pounds of indigenous flowers and powders, almost 70,000 sachets of herbal teas were produced at the Berbice incubator, and almost 5,000 sachets of tea, along with large quantities of dried pepper and dried fruits, were produced at the Lethem Business Incubator Center. Especially in the Lethem area, without those facilities, Mr. Speaker, much of those produce would go to waste. With the successful completion of this project, sir, the small farmers from the Lethem environs can preserve their produce and earn more revenues from the resulting value-added products that are placed in retail outlets throughout the country. And that is the difference between the PPPC and the AP and UAFC, sir. Here you have the same project, different administrations, different results. So this has nothing to do with access to oil revenues versus lack of oil revenues, Mr. Speaker. It is a matter of the contrast between competence and ineptitude. Mr. Speaker, no amount of oil money can buy them competence. Moving on with small business, Mr. Speaker, I have to make the point that support to small business is not merely grants and loans. A critically important support measure is training to build capacity. This year, we plan to train an additional 3,000 small business owners, adding to the 10,000 who have already benefited from training in areas like marketing fundamentals, business planning, and financial management. Mr. Speaker, I already alluded to the fact that in the construction sector, over close to 2,500 contractors received over $25 billion in small contracts. It is this kind of training, especially in planning and financial management, that enhances the capabilities of small businesses to allow them to benefit from these larger government contracts that we have been awarding in the construction and other sectors. So you can see, Mr. Speaker, our interventions are integrated into a cohesive whole that is designed to bring about inclusive, sustainable growth and development. So our support is not just limited to small grants. What we are doing also is facilitating alternative sources of financing and revenue for small businesses. For these businesses, Mr. Speaker, access to finance has been enhanced with the Security Interest in Movable Property Bill. An enhancement of revenue drove the institution of legal frameworks such as the 20% procurement set aside and the Local Content Act. The local content, which because of the constraints of time does not allow me to elaborate on its successes, but suffice it to say that in procurement alone in the oil and gas sector, we have over 1,000 Guyanese small businesses actively participating. Turning to the wider tourism sector, Mr. Speaker, here our performance continues to improve substantially as our policies continue to place Guyana on the map as a sought-after travel destination. A sum of $719 million is budgeted for 2025 to build on this progress. With recognition in media and travel magazines too numerous to mention, please permit me, sir, to list a few highlights. In 2024, Guyana received the International Travel Award for Destination of the Year, Ecological Tourism from the Pacific Travel Writers Association. The Guyana Tourism Authority received silver place in the 4th edition of the WTM Latin America Responsible Tourism Award 2024 in the category of Best Initiatives for Indigenous Tourism and their Traditional Communities. Guyana was nominated as Green Destination of the Year at the Caribbean Green Awards and for the World Travel Awards, South America's Responsible Tourism Award in 2024. The Iracama River Lodge earned a nomination as South America's leading eco-lodge at the WTM Responsible Awards in 2024. These awards and nominations constitute growing international recognition of our credentials for sustainable, eco-friendly tourism, our commitment to our indigenous communities, and our capacity to provide world-class experiences in harmony with nature. Our air connectivity has seen a significant boost with multiple new routes and airlines entering the market. The launch of direct flights between Guyana and Grenada by Inter-Caribbean Airways and the Caribbean Airlines introducing direct flights to Suriname have made regional travel more accessible. International connectivity has also improved with United Airlines launching a 4 times weekly service from Houston, Texas to Georgetown, and Avianca Airlines commencing direct flights between Guyana and Bogota, Colombia.
Honorable member, we will need an extension for you to continue to conclude.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask that the honourable member be given 5 minutes to conclude her presentation.
Thank you, Minister Teixeira. Honorable member, you may continue and conclude in 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, our coordinated and purposeful work has resulted in visitor arrivals setting an all-time record of 371,000 in the year 2024. This is more than 4 times the level of 82,000 recorded in 2020. It exceeds by over 16% last year's record-setting performance of 319,000. In total, visitor arrivals increased by more than 50,000 persons in 2024 as compared to 2023. This exemplifies what we mean, Mr. Speaker, when we say we have a record of competence and delivery. Mr. Speaker, we have $1.2 billion allocated to standardization and standard development for 2025. These activities have an integral role in developing our competitiveness. In this regard, the GNBS is one of those organizations that has an unobtrusive but critical role to play. It may not be widely known, but GNBS also plays a critical role in the petroleum sector. The Oil and Gas Department of the Bureau monitors operations on the FPSO. GNBS inspectors are stationed to oversee the custody transfer process and to ensure precision and accuracy of the transaction records relating to oil production and lifts. The GNBS is also responsible for sampling crude stored in cargo tanks to determine quality. You would no doubt readily appreciate, sir, that the quality of a lift will influence its price. Mr. Speaker, altogether, our inspectors aboard the FPSOs conduct more than 3,000 high-precision tests each year as they work on the front line to safeguard our oil revenues. They are our first line of assurance with respect to the integrity of these revenues, and it is not inappropriate to recognize their otherwise unseen and unsung role in protecting our patrimony. Such is the capability of the Bureau, Mr. Speaker, that they now provide testing and technical assistance services not only to local and foreign-owned businesses here in Guyana, but also to entities in several countries of the CARICOM region. Mr. Speaker, we can speak proudly of these things because our record is one of competence and delivery. In every sector, our approach is purposeful and result-oriented. The contrast with the record of our friends on the other side could not be starker. Mr. Speaker, I had cause on a previous occasion to go through in detail a number of promises made on the other side in their 2015 manifesto, none of which they kept. This year, as we approach elections, we are going to hear them again, promising Guyanese the moon, the stars, and the skies. They have already started, Mr. Speaker, with a pamphlet containing a slew of promises. And then the honorable member, Mr. Holder, mounted off a few of them in the House today. Once again, Mr. Speaker, you have to marvel at the audacity. Imagine, Mr. Speaker, they who imposed a value-added tax on electricity are now promising subsidies on electricity. They who imposed VAT on water are now promising the Guyanese people subsidies on water. They who took away the bonus from discipline services are now promising 35% increase in salaries for the discipline services. They who took away the $15,000 a year cash grant for school children are now promising $150,000 per year. The height of audacity, Mr. Speaker. They who promised a double old age pension in 2015 and didn't do it are promising again to double the old age pension. You have to marvel at the chispa, Mr. Speaker, at the audacity. In the face of their record, they come to the Guyanese people with a straight face, repeating these promises. I did know that all of the members on the other side were laughing when Mr. Holder was giving out the list of promises, and some did appear to be shocked. Then, for good measure, they promised free university education, which we have already announced last year. They have some vague promise of mortgage assistance when since 2013, the PPPC government introduced a mortgage interest relief program. Mr. Speaker, after ridiculing the part-time worker scheme from its inception, in this year, the opposition suddenly declares its support for the program, and they are promising to raise the part-time worker stipend by 25% from $40,000 to $50,000 a month. They are promising to cut taxes and increase spending. They criticize our payment of $100,000 for every newborn, but they are promising $150,000 per year every year for every child under 16. They are promising subsidies on almost everything under the sun. And on top of all that extra expenditure, Mr. Speaker, they are promising to cut taxes. But the Guyanese people know better. They know that the AP and UAFC never met a tax they wouldn't raise. They never met a benefit that they wouldn't remove, or never an election that they wouldn't rig. It's easy to make promises when you don't intend to keep them. It's their MO to raise taxes, snatch the benefits from the hard-working Guyanese, and then when the people reject them, try to steal their vote. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the achievements and measures I have outlined today are at the heart of the transformation that is taking place in Guyana under the stewardship of our PPPC government. We have worked tirelessly to create an environment where all our people thrive and prosper, from Region 1 to Region 10. Guyana's economic future looks incredibly bright as we continue to make strategic investments in infrastructure, human capital, tourism development, and support for local businesses, among other areas. And as we continue to work towards that future, we are committed to building on our successes and ensuring that every citizen of Guyana benefits from the opportunities created in our new economy. Budget 2025 maintains the platform for continued growth, resilience, and prosperity. And I wholeheartedly commend it to this honorable House and to the Guyanese people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Baldwin. And now for the Honorable Member, Mr. Vincent Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Guyana Action Party, a member of the coalition, I rise to critique the 2025 budget as presented by the Honorable Ashley Singh, MP, Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance. But, Ms. Comrade Speaker, we have to respond to some of the wrong statements made by a few of the speakers before. And for example, Mr. Honorable Vikram Bharat announced with pride of the promises that were fulfilled. And he said, the gas to energy project promise fulfilled. The whole of Guyana must have looked around to see where that promise, where there. Is it here? Is it here? Also, he didn't mention that we are supposed to be having natural resource parliamentary committee meetings regularly to discuss the problems and the issues affecting the natural resource sector. And I'm a member of that committee. And Mr. Honorable Vikram Bharat has never held a meeting with us since they became the installed government. We had 1 year when our Honorable Hastings was in charge, and she had over 11 meetings. So what is the problem? You're afraid of meetings? Come to meetings that discuss the people's welfare, especially the indigenous people's welfare. Mr. Speaker, promise fulfilled. Lightning speed fiber optic to the Rupununi and everywhere, promise fulfilled. It ended up halfway down the road in the savannas with a little piece of wire hanging down to the ground. Promise fulfilled. Promise fulfilled. The Skeldon Sugar Factory, oh my, promise fulfilled. Sugar price gone down. You're getting lots of sugar to sweeten the Guyanese people's pockets and everything else. Promise fulfilled. It's something that's gone, thrown away. Can I even go with it? And where's the Honorable Rodriguez? Competence versus ineptitude. Those projects tell you where the ineptitude is. Power ships, to make sure that we have light all day, all night. Blackout in what guy used to say? I can't say that. I see the speaker jumping up here. So, Mr. Speaker, they are trying to promote themselves. That is over there, trying to promote themselves as being of competence. What competence? Ineptitude, like what the Honorable Susan Rodriguez said. Mr. Speaker, the man in the street and the people of the hinterland are voicing that this is the last budget of the PPP, since they have failed miserably to look after the interests of the majority of the people in Guyana. Further, the man in the street, Mr. Speaker, they're saying that the PPP, knowing this, they're making final moves to stuff their already filled pockets, while the majority of Guyanese are struggling daily to put 3 meals on their tables. Mr. Speaker, I heard the Honorable Ashley Singh and others from the government side repeating an untruth. Mr. Speaker, in 2020, under the APNU AFC, the Hinterland Employment Youth Services Program, also known as the HAYES program, had some 2,500 hinterland youths actively involved in training in multiple life skills, plus a component that allowed the youths to be trained in entrepreneurship. Youths were also granted entrepreneurial grants to conduct small businesses for themselves. Mr. Speaker, On the ascension of the PPP into office in 2020, it dismantled the Hayes program and placed the 2,500 indigenous youths on breadline. In other words, the PPP fired the 2,500 indigenous youths and later replaced the Hayes program with the CSO's program. Nothing wrong with replacing a program, but you're firing our indigenous youths. And then you come every time to Parliament and repeat that we fired them. You were the one.
Well, honorable member, we have a contention as to who did the firing, and there is a document that was circulated, and we are going to be circulating that to clarify once and for all who did what.
Honorable Speaker, I think you heard me wrongly.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I was talking about 2020, not 2015. Mr. Speaker, the 2025 budget was awaited by the Guyanese people, holding their breaths with high expectations. Mr. Speaker, the people of Guyana saw that their welfare and livelihoods were not on the front burner for the past 4 years of the PPP in government, who year after year produced budgets that focused on infrastructural work that fattened the rich and the friends, families of the PPP at the expense of most Guyanese. Many people felt that because 2025 is the year of elections, that the PPP would have seen the folly of their ways and finally allocate an acceptable portion of the national pie to most Guyanese who are in dire need. Mr. Speaker, if any felt that the PPP would have redeemed itself by placing the welfare of the majority of Guyanese first, that feeling evaporated on the day the Honorable Ashley Singh made his 2025 budget presentation. Mr. Speaker, quite frankly, the budget was like a balloon that got burst and has left most Guyanese totally disappointed. Yes, Mr. Speaker, the PPP's 2025 budget is like a burst balloon. Mr. Speaker, in Region 9, popularly known as Rupununi, there were certain transformational projects that were expected by the people. One of these includes the extension of the bridge over the Rupununi River to allow persons to travel even when the periodic floods cover the bank of the Rupununi River. This project would have served all the 9 communities of the South Rupununi, including the Waiwais of Masakanari in the deep south of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, because of limited time, please allow me to list a few more transformational projects that any caring government who's got the money would have hastened to complete during the 5 years that they are in office, especially with oil resources. That was made possible by the APNU AFC. 1, bridge over the Rupununi River to Sand Creek. This crossing has already taken lives. People died there and continues to be a threat to life. Monies were there. Why wasn't this done? Bridge linking St. Ignatius to Central Latam. Currently, the bridge that exists floods periodically. This bridge will also connect 20 South Rupununi villages to Latam during the floods. This crossing is also a threat to life. And further, bridges to Katoka, Patarino, Parabara, and River villages, and others. Mr. Speaker, the PPP fools no one by suddenly launching projects such as building of secondary schools in their last year of being in government. The PPP had oil monies and 5 years to complete these crucial projects, but did not feel it important to do so. However, Mr. Speaker, the coalition will undertake to complete these crucial projects to a standard that can compete internationally. Plus, Mr. Speaker, construction and activation of secondary schools will be done in Napi, Latem, Katoka, Yupakari, and if a feasibility study supports, one in Cardanawa. I must admit that some have begun, and when we become the government next, we will continue it. It must be noted, Mr. Speaker, that it was the coalition that started and supported secondary schools in Karasabay, Napi, and Moreno. We did the classes there in preparation for the schools. The coalition will work towards the satisfactory completion of these projects in their entirety. Mr. Speaker, the coalition plans to massively improve the hinterland roads that will see improvements of all-weather roads and with bitumen concrete roads to strategic and populated hinterland communities, thus making hinterland travels more comfortable and safer. Hinterland people will be able to improve their livelihoods utilizing the improved road networks. Mr. Speaker, the coalition in its limited time in government was very visionary. One project that stands out is the Linden to Latham Road and the Kurupakari Bridge. Had there not been a no-confidence vote against the APNU AFC orchestrated by the PPP, the Linden to Mabura leg of the road would have already been completed, and the Kurupakari Bridge would have been progressing well. I understand that, Mr. Speaker, the coalition will continue the building of the Kurupakari Bridge. Seemingly, the PPP is considering omitting this bridge from the project. Mr. Speaker, the Kurupakari Bridge, when completed by the coalition, will not only be a plus for the transportation of people and goods, but will be designed to facilitate tourism. It will become a tourist hotspot, creating real jobs, high-paying jobs, and opportunities for service providers to earn money. Mr. Speaker, the coalition's 3.5 years track record for the development in the hinterland is very impressive when compared to the PPP's 23 years in government. The coalition in government did not have oil resources to prop it up, yet one can safely say that the coalition of the APNU AFC had the interests at heart of the people of the hinterland and all Guyanese. Mr. Speaker, the coalition introduced townships in Latham, Mabaruma, Bartica, and Madia. Today, these new towns provide vital services to the people in their regions and are showing signs of becoming thriving townships. However, through a lack of vision by the PPP, the impetus for the creation of unique townships in the hinterland that reflect the history and the culture of the areas have been put on the back burner. Mr. Speaker, the coalition completed several roads and bridges that set examples for others to follow. Latham's main road is an example of excellence. The Manari concrete and steel bridge is another example. These and others, too many to mention now, were done without oil monies. The people of Latham, all through the 23 years of the PPP's administration, suffered by inhaling red dust. During the PPP's 23 years, biscuit roads were the norm. These PPP roads lasted for a short while and then deteriorated into potholes. In the south of Panuni, the coalition worked with the Brazilian army to provide potable water to communities. Each village had a trained local technician employed to ensure that the facilities function to their maximum potential. This necessary decision, based on common sense, was changed by the PPP's government, and today the supply of potable water now functions in a sloppy and ad hoc manner. Mr. Speaker, just imagine that the PPP installed a water distribution system in Charlton that is expected to supply water to houses that are higher than the source of the water and have no visible valve to regulate the movement of the water. The result is that the system is now a white elephant. And guess what? Just more enrichment for the PPP's friends and families, while the poor people suffer. Mr. Speaker, during the 23 years of the PPP in government, information dissemination and communication were kept in the dark. The coalition, on ascending to office, immediately activated radio stations in Latham, Charlton, Oriala, Madia, and Bartica. Also, internet was installed in hinterland villages, thus linking the remote hinterland communities to the rest of Guyana and the world at large. And that brings me to the point that yesterday I was sent a message by someone in the hinterland who voiced his concern. He's saying, why is he only hearing the presentations being made by the government ministers on NCN radio? Why? And why is he not hearing when the opposition parliamentarians speak? So why are they not hearing when I'm speaking now, a representative of the hinterland? Why are we being blocked out? Is this democracy? Is this what we want from any government? The PPP did not facilitate local government for over 20 years. Yet they speak as if they love democracy. The coalition and ascension to government brought back local government elections. And I would warn you, I can shout loudly. The coalition and ascension to government brought back local government elections, thanks to President David Granger. Mr. Speaker, it was the coalition that brought back democracy to Guyana. The coalition brought light that overcame the darkness by the PPP's 23 years of mismanagement. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Ashley Singh spent a large amount of time during his budget speech comparing the performance of the coalition's government pre-oil term of 3 years to the development that happened from the PPP's 2020 to 2024, a period that was and continues to be flush with trillions of dollars prepared and provided for by the APNU AFC. Mr. Speaker, every school child knows that it was the coalition that brought oil and its massive wealth to Guyana. Every school child also knows that the wealth is not trickling down to most of the Guyanese people. Mr. Speaker, it was the coalition that signed the agreement for the industrial common stream. One would remember the PPP shouted at the top of their voices that they would change the contract. Today the PPP is wallowing in the proceeds and enriching themselves on top, their friends and their families, while neglecting the majority of the Guyanese people. It must be noted that the man in the engine room, who is the de facto boss man of the PPP, recently said that he has no apology for fattening the PPP's friends and families. Mr. Speaker, we heard the PPP telling a lot of Anansi stories about the 18 million signing bonus. At that time, we as a nation were on hot coals with regards to safeguarding our territorial integrity. The 18 million signing bonus was deposited in the Bank of Guyana and used largely to cover our expenses accrued in the wholesome defense of our sovereignty and territorial integrity. We in the hinterland and as a nation are thankful for the wise handling of our resources to keep us safe. Now we continue to experience the bungling inaction of the PPP that does not make us feel safe as a nation. Instead of safeguarding our nation, they're busy filling their pockets. That's what they're doing. I recall when Venezuela had its referendum, all the top officials of the PPP, including the Honorable Ashley Singh, who is not here, found a reason to run out of Guyana. They left, all of them left. They left back somebody, oh, he's not here, he's gone. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Ashley Singh said that the government had committed to 15% of carbon credit inflows to the indigenous villages. Mr. Speaker, it must be noted that to date, the PPP cannot prove that the indigenous peoples of Guyana were allowed to participate and give their free, prior, informed consent in all decisions made with regard to carbon credits. Mr. Speaker, the coalition government, on assuming office, will facilitate a process that allows free, prior, and informed consent by the indigenous peoples of Guyana. Key in the discussions will be the reworking of the formula to allow the indigenous communities and peoples to get a large percentage of the carbon credit inflows. We will further propose to the indigenous peoples of Guyana that a two-tiered system be used in the dissemination of the carbon credit grant, in which a percentage to be decided on will be allocated to family units in the villages, and the balance will be allocated to fund priorities of their annual community development plans. The families will decide how they will spend their grants. This will see the quality of personal life improve in multiple ways, such as in education, health, housing, transportation, entrepreneurship, power generation, etc. Thus, the families could decide that their priority for a year would be X, and they will do it. Mr. Speaker, according to a DBB article titled, Guyana approves US $148 million for indigenous communities and 148 million for indigenous communities on climate resilience dated 27 July 2024. A sum of US 22.4 will be directly distributed among 242 indigenous communities nationwide, while 126.5 million US was dedicated to climatic adaptations initiative, including constructing major canal sluice, rehabilitation, and procuring pumps and excavators across multiple regions. Mr. Speaker, a question being asked by the indigenous peoples and local and foreign observers is what were the project's expenses that the $125.5 million were spent on in 2023. Mr. Speaker, we read in the news that among of Guyana, 865 million was awarded to a contractor who had no experience for the construction of the Bellevue pumping station, and to date this entity is not completed. Mr. Speaker, also another contract was awarded to a similarly unqualified contractor to the tune of 981 million plus for the construction of a pump station at Port Join in West Demerara. Mr. Speaker, according to one news outlet, little work was done on these projects at the end of 2024. Mr. Speaker, the indigenous people want answers. Are the monies just mentioned taken from the sale of our carbon credits? And are they being misused? Are these monies being placed in the hands of the PPP's friends, families, and favorites? Mr. Speaker, and it is the opposite to note that the PPP's methodology of distributing cash grants is murky and has facilitated more monies for themselves, their friends, and their families. Also, when the PPP distributed cash grants in their strongholds, they basically shared money to their supporters. In a recent distribution of business grants in Rupununi, I was informed by an influential PPP supporter that top PPP officials received cash grants on every opportunity. It was said that the villagers traveling long distances, hoping to get the grants, but after paying for bus, boat, and other fees and expenses, went back home empty-handed. However, the report stated that all members of certain families, PPP families, including the maid, the children, and even babies, received cash grants. Mr. Speaker, the PPP person who gave me the information said that he or she, I will say, was sure that the PPP would lose the next election because of this C word that cannot be mentioned in Parliament. Mr. Speaker, the distribution of the recent $100,000 cash grant was and continues to be a fiasco. Untold suffering and disgusting and degrading treatment was meted out to our pensioners and other Guyanese. One wonders why the PPP did not use existing databases to develop a humane methodology to pay out the cash grants. Is it that the PPP wanted to propagandize the cash grant distribution to gain political points? Well, this certainly backfired and has proven to the Guyanese people that we have an incompetent and caring PPP government. According to many people, the PPP ain't ready yet. Mr. Speaker, the coalition, in line with its people-centered development strategy, will give cash transfers to the people of Guyana, but the system will be humane, organized, and stress-free. Mr. Speaker, the recently held National Two-House Council conference was stage managed by the PPP. Firstly, a main keynote speech by the PPP was riddled with inaccuracies. An attempt was made to rewrite the history of the indigenous people, and we cannot allow that. According to the PPP, the history of the indigenous people started or began in 1992. It was said that prior to 1992, there were no scholarships for hinterland students to attend institutions of higher learning. This is a blatant untruth. The Honorable Shirley Melville, former Member of Parliament, posted a picture of hinterland students who were on scholarship during the pre-1992 era. And there were many more hinterland scholars on scholarship during the pre-1992 era. One outstanding scholar was Dr. Jimmy LaRose, who went to Queen's College. The PPP also pronounced that land titling was not done by the PNC prior to 1992. Mr. Speaker, it was the PNC that agreed to and worked towards the facilitation of land titling in Guyana. It was a PNC that facilitated the formation and activities of the Amerindian Land Commission. Further, land title of indigenous communities began in 1974, long before 1992. According to a study titled Midterm Evaluation of Amerindian Land Title Project in Guyana by Carlos Comacho Hazar in 2014, he says that in 1974, the PNC government of Guyana granted land titles amounted to 6,125.6 square miles, and then titled 7 villages of Region 7 in 1991, covering an additional 1,596.1 square miles. This amounted to 7,721.7 square miles granted by the PNC indigenous village prior to 1992. Our history did not start in 1992. We were the first people in Guyana. Now, don't make me get on like that now. We were the first people in Guyana. We started the history in Guyana. And I will tell all of those who come and say 1992 history started for us. The PNC facilitated some 90 grants to indigenous communities, Mr. Speaker, during the last coalition government. Absolute grants were given to Sassourine, Kangaruma, Asturia, Yupukari, St. Monica, and Mainstay, Wayaka. Mr. Speaker, one must know that a lot of work was done by the coalition with regards to land titling and related matters, but due to the no confidence motion orchestrated by the PPP, many of the villages were not finalized. However, Mr. Speaker, the institutional memory of the work was left with the Ministry of Army Affairs and should have been continued if the PPP had any care for the indigenous peoples. I have heard the minister saying that no paperwork on land titling was left by the coalition, but this untruth is nullified by the fact that the head of the Amerindian Land Titling Unit of the Ministry of Army Affairs continued in his position after the change of government and was eventually promoted to the position of Commissioner of Lands and Services Commission. Mr. Speaker, I personally know that many villages were on the verge of getting their titles and extensions. One of these is St. Ignatius, that has a very large population of indigenous people. Currently, St. Ignatius only have a few square miles of title land. At a recent meeting, the Honorable Pauline Sukai, when questioned on the St. Ignatius extension that was applied for, said, and I quote, in her words, "Land don't grow." Mr. Speaker, for the Honorable Sukai, who holds the position as Minister of Army Affairs, to say that land doesn't grow when asked about extension for indigenous villages, it shows her inability to empathize with the first people of Guyana. One wonder if the Honorable Pauline Sukai sees herself as an indigenous person. Somebody said sometime, it could be Chinese. For us, the first people, land is our mother. It is our sustenance. It is our wealth. Without adequate lands, we will be forced to live like fish out of water. We call on the Honorable Pauline Sukai to withdraw the statement that land doesn't grow and apologize to the indigenous people of Guyana. We call for an apology. When you say land don't grow, it's an insult to our livelihoods. Mr. Speaker, the PPP treats indigenous organizations as if they were foreign enemies. At the last NTC conference, the APA continued to be under attack by top PPP leaders. The APA is well known for standing up for the rights of the indigenous peoples of Guyana. We, the indigenous peoples, are pleased and thankful for the advocacy on our behalf by the APA. Also, the newly formed district councils, such as the Upper Macaroni District Council and others, are under threat by the PPP. It must be noted that it was the APNU AFC coalition government that formally recognized the South Rupununi District Council as a district council via Section 35.1 of the Amerindian Act. The next coalition government will make it a priority to ratify the district councils that make the necessary applications and are qualified under the Amerindian Act of 2006. Mr. Speaker, 2025 budget does not cater for a livable stipend for tushals and any form of remuneration for village councillors. The coalition government will increase the tushal stipend to an amount that compensates them for the hard work that they do and allow them to live in dignity. I will not call the amount because you all go on for Okay. Councillors will also be paid an honorarium. Councillors will also be paid. I will leave this to the other speakers after me to announce the amount. And sorry for y'all. Y'all gonna move it from there. Maybe not even over here. You're going outside. Village councils will be given an administrative grant to hire an administrator and provide basic equipment and supplies for the improved performance of the council's official duties. Mr. Speaker, our coalition government will continue the payment of presidential grants to villages, but will increase the amounts allocated to allow the village to have enough funds to improve their village buildings, vehicles, boats, engines, farms, etc. Community support officers and part-time workers and others such ad hoc programs will be paid an increased honorarium. Currently, these programs are not well managed. The coalition government will increase the stipend to at least $50,000 per month and facilitate the CSOs and part-time workers to get training in applicable skills. Business training will also be done, and those who are interested in entrepreneurship will be given an adequate business grant to start their own business. A monitoring and evaluation component will be put in place to assist youth entrepreneurs with advice and will recommend youths who are evaluated as deserving to get an annual business continuation grant. That is what you call something that's going to be transformational for the indigenous people. It must be noted that many youths who are given
To continue that transformation, you need an extension.
Mr. Speaker, I move for the honorable member to be given 5 minutes to conclude his presentation.
Honourable member, you may continue
Thank you,
and conclude in 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker. It must be noted that many youths who are given business grants under the APNU are now active in business enterprises. A number of those trained are now involved in managing their shops, farms, ranches, etc. There are many examples, but at least, I'll say one at least. There is one youth who came to me other day and reported that he bought 2 cows using his business grant so many years ago, and today he has 12 heads of cattle. He's on his way to becoming a rancher. Mr. Speaker, the list of success stories is long and impressive. Mr. Speaker, in one budget debate, I heard the Minister of Marine Affairs and others on the PP saying that no business managed by youths could be found. These statements were not only highly offensive, but highly disrespectful to our indigenous youths who are using their skills and resource gained via the APNU AFCCE program to improve their livelihoods. Yet, after trying to destroy our indigenous youth's self-confidence, the PPP will go to the indigenous communities to beg the indigenous youths for their votes. The Minister of Marine Affairs owes another apology, this time to the indigenous youths of Guyana. I repeat, the Minister of Marine Affairs owes another apology, this time to the indigenous youths of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, the PPP during the past 4 years have shown their determination to erode the rights of the indigenous peoples of Guyana. Some examples of these are as follows. The people of Isenero were forced to petition the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights because they felt that their rights were being violated. The Commission, in response, ruled that the state of Guyana is responsible for the violation of the community's right to equality before the law, health, justice, participation, collective territorial property, and due process. Mr. Speaker, in regards to Chinese landing, the residents petitioned the IACHR because they were facing threats, harassment, and acts of violence to their opposition to mining on their lands. Mr. Speaker, the IACHR, in its wisdom, granted precautionary rights in favor of the indigenous Caribs community of Chinese landing, who it said were currently at serious, urgent risk of suffering irreparable harm to their human rights as a result of mining and other activities. Mr. Speaker, instead of supporting the indigenous peoples of Chinese landing, the PPP decided to punish them and has put a ban on mining in Chinese landing. However, according to reports, the ban only affects the indigenous peoples and seem not to be applicable to the outside miners who are still causing problems in the first place. Mr. Speaker, it must be noted that in defense of the PPP's position to the ISCHR, the PPP said that the people of the Senru are not indigenous because they practice a cash economy, do not have traditional houses, and are Christians. Mr. Speaker, so now the PPP is saying that most of us in the 9 indigenous nations of Guyana are not Amerindians or indigenous. Wow. The PPP tried in Parliament to pass a bill called the Single Windows Bill that would have seen the indigenous people losing their rights to their lands. Luckily, the APNU-AFC stood against it, and the bill was sent to a special select committee for correction. The PPP passed a bill on the petroleum activities called the Petroleum Activities Bill using a slim majority. This bill gives the PPP legal rights to conduct identification of areas of interest, exploration and production of petroleum on areas including indigenous land that are ancestral, titled land contiguous to indigenous lands without the free, prior, informed consent of indigenous peoples. Mr. Speaker, recently the Acquisition of Lands for Public Purposes Bill was passed to allow the PPP to acquire lands, including lands owned by Amerindians or indigenous peoples, without their free, prior, informed consent. Mr. Speaker, the PPP, jaundiced with greed, has shown repeatedly that it wants to take away Amerindian or indigenous lands. We, in the indigenous people, have to watch the PPP with 4 eyes. Mr. Speaker, the People's Progressive Party continues to stymie the revision of the Amerindian Act. Although there are sections that are still of importance in this act, there are some that have to be revised to serve the purpose of defending the rights of the indigenous peoples. Also, some additional clauses will have to this purpose. Mr. Speaker, one of the many weaknesses of the Amerindian Act of 2006 is that it does not prevent the Geology and Mines Commission from granting mining concessions that superimpose indigenous communities, even after the land request legal and administrative process had begun. There are reports of mining concessions and mining activities being done upriver to indigenous communities, thus creating health and environmental problems for the indigenous peoples. At the last NTC conference, One Tusha reported that over 20 mining concessions were granted on the land that is allocated to be its extension. The coalition government will facilitate the revision of the Amerindian Act and bring in line other legal acts such as the Mining Act to bring about the strengthening of the rights of the indigenous peoples using the FPIC methodology. Among inclusions is that the Amerindian Act will be renamed to reflect its purpose. And it would be, and one of the changes that's going to be would be a regulatory framework would be there added to enforce the rights and mediate disputes. The Mining Act will be amended to enable the GDMC to issue a cease work order for violation of the Amerindian Act, etc. Mr. Speaker, some of the other issues of concern by the indigenous peoples that were placed on the front burner by the coalition.
To continue with some of the other issues, you may have to wait until you return to Parliament next year. Thank you very much, Honourable Member. And now for the Honourable Member, Miss Yvonne Pierce. Honourable Member Yvonne Pearson Fredericks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to make my contribution, and not my contribution, but I can speak on behalf of the indigenous peoples, or the Amerindian peoples as we are called, of Guyana. And therefore, I'm proud to be standing here today representing the Amerindian peoples of Guyana, and also the ordinary working peoples of Guyana, the farmers, the laborers, the hotel workers, whatever. I stand here proud as a representative of the ordinary people. Mr. Speaker, as I said, I stand here in support of Budget 2025, a secure, prosperous, and sustainable Guyana. However, before I direct my attention to the budget, I wish to make some rebuttals. I would like to say to the honorable member, Mr. Henry, he writes on behalf of the Guyana Action Party. The Guyana Action Party GAP. But where is that party? So as far as we know, there's 2 members in the party, 2 members. But as I said, we on this side of the house, we reach out to the total population of Guyana. The People's Progressive Party reached to the end, to the utmost end of this country. And I can say that because I've been there. I've walked this land. From the rivers to the creeks, to the mountain tops, to the savanna, to the swamp, I have been there as a representative of the People's Progressive Party. And I haven't met anyone who can say, I am Guyana Action Party. So that leaves me to wonder, I only know 2 members. 2 members. The honorable member say he speaks to man in the street. And these people is saying the budget has nothing. Who are you talking to, honorable member? You know, you spoke about many things, and you said when you get back to office. But it's good to dream. You're in a slumber, you're dreaming. And I urge you to wake up and see the reality of what is happening in this country, our country, Guyana, your country, my country. What is happening? Because you're far off track, sir. You're far off track. I want to respond to you on the Hayes program. Nobody fired them. Some of them came over under the CSO program. Most of them came under the CSO program. You said the coalition have a good track record. Oh my. Honorable member, if the coalition had such a good record, what are you doing over there? What are you doing over there if your records were so good and you did so many things for the Guyanese people? How come you're over there? How come? And you have done so many things for the Guyanese people. Come on, wake up. You're dreaming. You're dreaming. Honorable member spoke a lot about FPIC. Free, prior, and informed consent. Honorable member, I wonder if you use FPIC in the distribution of the $165 SLED project funds. Did you, 165 million, sorry, $165 million of the SLED project funds. Did you use FPIC? Free, prior, and informed consent. The honorable member spoke about land titling. Yes, it is true that prior to 1992, Amerindian villages, they did receive land title. Yes, that is true. You are correct, and I think that's the only correct thing you said. You are correct. However, under the PPPC, land titling continued. The project and the program continue. And I'm saying when we left office in 2015, funds were there to continue that project. And in May 2018, a former minister said I was unable to title any village. That is in public knowledge.
Yes.
I was unable. Funds were there. In your manifesto, in the APNO manifesto, they said, they promised that they would address the issue of land titling and Amerindian land titling. They said it according to international standards. So, sir, you come here and talk about FPIC and international standards. They promised that. And what happened? What happened? They failed. They failed. Although in their manifesto, that was one of their big promises, to address the Amerindian land titling and Amerindian land issue according to international standards. And in May 2018, the minister said, I was unable to title any village. So then when was a village title under that administration, under AFC, APNU, or whatever they call themselves? When? Let me say, Mr. Speaker, I can say this because I was part of the land titling team. In fact, I was the head of the land titling team. So all the reports that was submitted, all the reports was work that we had done, that we left there. All they had to do was hand out the certificate. All the work that we done. And so what? So don't come bring promises again, honorable member. Get your information straight. Mr. Speaker, I wish to say, on day number 1, the honorable member, Jurita Finance, in her presentation, she said people are poorer now. Poorer. In her presentation, she said if you walk around the villages and talk to the people and ask them if they have received funds, millions of dollars, people are poorer. In her presentation, she said that the government is reckless in spending. Mr. Speaker, I wish to say, I don't know where the honorable member visit. I don't know who she's talking to. But as we go around in the villages and communities, and as I said before, I'm representing the ordinary people because I talk to the ordinary people. I rub shoulders with the ordinary people. They have a smile on their face. They have a smile on their face. They are comfortable. They are happy because what is happening, the interests of the people are being met. So I would like the honorable members to visit the local villages and community and talk to the people. I don't know who they're talking to, Mr. Speaker, but talk to the ordinary people. And if, Mr. Speaker, I would like to say, if addressing the issues and the needs and the things that are affecting the people, like providing better health services, construction of schools, roads, assistance for farmers, if that is reckless spending, and if that is recklessness, well, I think we would like to see more recklessness. More recklessness. If addressing the needs of the people is deemed as being a reckless government, then I would like the ordinary people to hear that the assistance that is being given to them is deemed as recklessness. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member, Mr. Holder, came with a nice plan. Wow, good plan. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? 2015, they came with 100 days plan, 100 days. And my colleague, honorable member Barrett, read some of the 100 days plan. They failed to deliver. They went out there and they promised in 100 days what will be done, and they failed. But here is Mr. Holder coming now with a 90 days plan. 90 days plan. The honorable member, yes, the honorable member. The honorable member now is coming with a 90 days plan. And guess what? With a bigger plan. If you could not have delivered in your 100 days plan, how come now you coming with 90 days? Who are you trying? I can't say hoodwink, huh? No.
Who are you trying to fool?
Who are you trying?
Who are you trying to fool?
Well, no, I don't think I can say fool either. But who are you trying to what? To blackmail? No, oh my.
Hoodwink.
Hoodwink? No. But what stroke you coming with now? What stroke you coming with now? 90 days. And you are going to tell the people out there, the Guyanese people, that within 90 days I can do this. Are you a magician? I don't know if he's a magician. Because And then, Mr. Speaker, he said they are a government in waiting, coming with a 90 days plan, bigger than before, could not have delivered on your 100 days plan. Now you're coming and tell me something. The government in waiting, you have a long, long, long time to wait. Long wait. Because guess what? You're all dreaming. You are all dreaming. And it's good to dream. It is good to dream. So continue to dream. Mr. Speaker, you know, we have seen many things. We know what the coalition is all about. And the Guyanese people knows what the coalition is all about. And Mr. Speaker, they can see, because it is there for all to see, the development, the transformation that has taken place within the past 4 years. It is there. It's not anything that we can hide. Everyone can see and everyone knows. A lot of people listen to the budget. They're saying that nothing is in the 2025 budget, but the ordinary people see benefits. The ordinary people see benefits. The ordinary people have seen what has taken place from 2020, from August 2020 to today. The ordinary people see, and they remember. They remember what had happened before. They remember. It cannot be erased. One presenter said that the APNU, the AFC brought back democracy to this country. That is untrue. That is untrue. Mr. Speaker, maybe I'm one of the oldest person in this house, and I lived the life for many years, and I know what it was. Before 1992, I know the suffering, and I can talk about it. I can talk about it. I know the suffering. And I know when democracy was brought back in this country. I know 1992. 1992. And I know in 2018, when the honorable member, Ms. Ferguson, went to my village in Mainstay and said to the people, don't vote for Yvonne Pearson. No, because we have the money now. We are the APNU AFC. She told the resident of my village, don't vote for me because the PPP is not in office and they don't have the money. The honorable member, Mr. Speaker, that is a fact. That is the truth. And I know what happened. And I know when democracy was brought back. And I know when freedom of speech returned to this country. I know, because I was there for many years. And there are many things that I can say, but I would not say it here. I would not say it here. But I know, because I've lived. I know. Mr. Speaker, as I said before, tremendous development. And sir, I would like to, we have heard mention about the low carbon development strategy. We have heard of the many development that has taken place within Amerindian villages and community. Sir, I would like to, we have heard how people are poorer and how people are struggling to put meal on the table. That is not so. That is not so.
Honorable member, you need to give you 5 minutes to continue to conclude.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the honourable member be given 20 minutes, 5 minutes. 5 minutes to continue. According to my record, she has.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, you have 5 minutes in which to conclude.
I wish to say now, and I wish to call figures, sir. In region number 1, under the LCDS, 35 million, Carbury. And I wish to say what the senior counselor said. And I quote, Mr. Earl Rodriguez is the committed senior counselor of Carbury. He noted that the satellite village benefited tremendously from the 2023 LCDS carbon credit allocation. Mr. Rodriguez appreciates the democratic nature of the program, which empowers residents to take charge of the development. He also thanked all the actors throughout the various levels of government who work tremendously towards indigenous development. Sir, this is just one, and I have many here from region 1 to 10. We have persons who are saying how they benefited, and I wish to say even from Shulinab, where the honorable member come from. They benefited from $24 million. And this is what 2 pensioners said. This is what my wife and I are benefiting from the carbon credit money. We use our allocation to do better farming. That is what said. My wife and I, we live alone and we are old. We depend on our farms. Mr. Speaker, and if I had the time to go through all that I have here, this is what directly from the villages, this is what they benefited from. I wish to say, sir, Honorable Member Jurita said, finance, people are suffering, people are poorer, but here I have from Cartabo, which is not far from Bartica. Here I have from Agatash, which is nearby to Bartica, and I wish to read what they said. Cartabo Region 7 received $18 million, and here is what one resident says. I did not have enough nets to do the amount of fishing that I wanted to do. So the nets and the other items I got from the LCDS was very good to me, and I'm really happy about it. I catch double the amount, yes, of fish because the new nets, so I earn more. This let me have a freezer. Imagine this little fisherman now, he extends his fishing. He is able to buy a freezer to store the fishes and improve my business. Later, I will be getting a generator. Mr. Speaker, these are ordinary people who benefited from the LCDS. Under this government and in this very building, I remember former Excellency Dr. Jagdio promised us as to show that any funds come from the forest, we will benefit. Here today I have evidence, sir. And this only happened under the People's Progressive Party Civic. And we are talking, I can go through also, I wish if I had the opportunity. We are talking about progress, prosperity. That is what we are talking about, sir. And even in the Bible, even in the good book which everybody know, in the book of John 3, I think, 3 John, chapter 1, verse 2, above all things, the Lord wants us to prosper. And under the People's Progressive Party, we are talking prosperity. Sir, and our motto, we are a secure, prosperous, and sustainable Guyana for all Guyanese. Sir, I'm sorry that I cannot even address what is there for us, the Amerindian people, in the 2025 budget. In closing, sir, I want to say to the honorable member, Ms. Chanda, I cannot remember the exact words, but I think she said something like this. She sees no reason why we shouldn't support the budget. And I think that's good thinking, sir. Put Guyana first. Put our people first. And I said, thank you, Ms. Chandon. Yes, good thinking. Let us all put the people first. This is our country. And we ought to look out for our people. And I am saying, sir, regardless of what is being said, the honorable member left because they don't want to hear the truth. And in my hands here, I have facts. Facts. And that is what I would like to present to this honorable house. So, sir, on behalf of the Amerindian peoples of this country and the ordinary people, we support 2025 budget. Securing future for prosperous Guyana. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Ms. Pearson Fredericks. I now invite the Honorable Member, Ms. Tabitha Sarabo Hali, to make her contribution.
Mr. Speaker, as I stand before you to give my perspective on Budget 2025, my presentation will focus on the several pressing issues that impact our nation's future. Issues of professionalism, issues of fairness, of economic planning, and the well-being of our public servants and workers in key industries. In doing so, Mr. Speaker, I am reminded of a pertinent quote that says, "A fact gains meaning when placed within a larger context." As I listened to the 2025 budget presentation by the Minister with responsibility for finance and his colleagues who spoke on Friday last, we heard what can be only deemed an expert seminar in deception. The intention appears to be to dissect subjective facts and entwine them with political jargon, all aiming to evoke emotional responses from our citizens. Yet, amid this political theater, we must confront a glaring reality, a persistent and blatant disregard for the truth. Yet, Mr. Speaker, the reality remains that a fact gains meaning when placed within a larger context. It is troubling, Mr. Speaker, to observe this persistent and blatant disregard for the truth, which seeks to distort history in various facets of this budget presentation and its accompanying debate. We must ask ourselves, do the persons who put this budget presentation together genuinely value truth and factual accuracy, or are they merely focused on gaining cheap political points at the expense of deceiving the very people they claim to serve? Mr. Speaker, as I listened to the minister wax lyrical about this budget, it was not difficult to recognize the validity of the statement made by former Minister Winston Jordan when he said quite recently that the budget, like all other PPP budgets, were not grounded in any medium or long-term plan. It befuddles my mind, Mr. Speaker, as to how people who claim to be learned cannot appreciate the necessity of things like a robust strategic plan. How can you run an entire country without a blueprint for growth and prosperity? It's simply laughable to come to this august house and say to us, or all the citizens tuned in, that your manifesto is your strategic plan for growth and development. We cannot be seriously saying this, Mr. Speaker. A strategic development plan provides a framework for decision-making, ensuring that every budgetary allocation aligns with your long-term vision. Without this foundation, Mr. Speaker, we risk creating budgets that may respond to immediate needs, but fail to prepare us for future challenges. Mr. Speaker, just to elaborate, to help those of us who simply cannot grasp what I'm trying to say. If we were to consider some of the works being done by contractors who are building our roads all across this country, and a few weeks after the ribbon cutting, they begin falling apart. The exterior looked perfect at the inception. Upon completion, but an obvious weak foundation meant that the construction was fated to fail. Similarly, a budget devoid of strategic direction is destined to falter, leaving our economy vulnerable, Mr. Speaker. If we believe that our citizens deserve proactive governance, then we would invest in a strategic framework. Mr. Speaker, as we try to wrap our minds around the need for a strategic plan, even after 4 years into this administration, Let's take a look at the title of this budget: A Secure, Prosperous, and Sustainable Guyana. Mr. Speaker, in all fairness, if we are to look at the budget without putting it into context, one can say that there are significant investments in sectors such as education and health, because both sectors will receive more money than they did last year. It would be difficult to overlook the reality that certain measures will put extra monies into the pockets of Guyanese. But as I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, a fact gains meaning when placed within a larger context. You see, Mr. Speaker, nothing in this document specifically addresses how the proposed measures will directly contribute to security, to prosperity, and sustainability. Throughout the budget presentation, Mr. Speaker, there is an emphasis on increased public spending, yes. However, without clear implementation strategies, timelines, or accountability mechanisms, these measures may not translate into tangible benefits for the population. The general commitments do not address crucial aspects such as equitable access to services, targeted interventions for vulnerable populations, or sustainable economic practices. Mr. Speaker, the document does not sufficiently detail how these initiatives will collectively address the complex challenges facing the nation, including fluctuating economic conditions, environmental sustainability, or social inequities. Without a comprehensive set of actionable policies that explicitly, Mr. Speaker, recognize and respond to these issues, there is a significant risk that the proposed measures may fall short of achieving the desired outcomes for all citizens. To give a specific example, Mr. Speaker, the information in the budget shows that the population growth rate in Guyana decreased from 0.4 in 2020 to 0.3 in 2024. Suggesting a shift either towards stabilization maybe, or potential decline in the population size. This decline may stem from low birth rates and changing societal norms. If this is the basis, Mr. Speaker, for the 100,000 grant to every newborn, then more has to be done. The comments on social media alone from Guyanese should signal to this government that $100,000 in isolation without other concrete beneficial measures, such as access to proper schooling, making the basic nutritional and medicinal needs of the child free, especially in those cases where the public hospitals do not have the necessary or required medicines up to the age of 5, or access to food that would ensure that child has a balanced diet up to the age of 10, or secure housing and a livable wage, unless some substantive policy or program of the aforementioned nature is put in place, Guyanese would not be inclined to increase our current birth rate. These measures cannot be one-off, Mr. Speaker. Along with those measures, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that the citizens of Guyana live in a more secure, prosperous, and sustainable environment, several targeted policies and measures must be considered. First, Mr. Speaker, we note the one-off 100,000 cash grant that began last year, and persons still waiting for them this year. No one would deny themselves an extra $100,000. But we must be fair to ourselves and to the Guyanese population. A one-off 100,000 cannot be seen as a substantive amount of money to alleviate the current high rise in our cost of living over the last 4 years. Second, Mr. Speaker, while there are some current measures that attempt to diversify the economy, I believe that more concrete policies, programs cater to seriously diversifying the economy beyond the oil sector is necessary. Third, Mr. Speaker, we must see the importance of establishing partnerships with industries or apprenticeship and internship programs, giving students real-world experience and facilitating smoother transitions into the workforce. Though I am aware that this is happening on a small scale, I do believe that this should be expanded. Fourth, Mr. Speaker, implementing policies that enhance education and vocational training, ensuring access to quality education at all levels, focusing on critical thinking, on technology and vocational skills that align with labor market needs must be a priority. The importance of financial literacy, Mr. Speaker. Financial literacy and inclusion programs cannot be overlooked. Educational programs aimed at improving financial literacy among citizens, enabling better personal financial management and investment practices, has to be on the agenda of any government who wants to seriously ensure that there is such a thing as the accumulation of generational wealth. This, along with facilitating access to banking services and financial products for unbanked populations to promote savings and economic stability, is necessary at this time. By implementing these policies and measures, Guyana can create a more secure, prosperous, and sustainable environment for its citizens, ensuring that they benefit from both current and future economic opportunities. These initiatives would not only address immediate needs, but also lay the foundation for long-term resilience and growth. Mr. Speaker, I am not the Shadow Minister of Education, and I know my colleague will speak to these matters, but my burden for education would not allow me to pass this by without highlighting the fact that our education system is not what it should be. We cannot, Mr. Speaker, we cannot be whining and dining ourselves at gold, diamond, and platinum balls, celebrating how much monies we have access to as a government, and be content with the negative trend that is currently permeating the education sector. Over the past 4 years, our matriculation rate has plummeted from 49% to mere 26%. This decline is alarming, Mr. Speaker, especially in light of the government's claim of progress, building new schools and increasing the percentage of trained teachers from 71% to 86%. While these efforts are commendable, and I must commend the Minister of Education for focusing on training our teachers, they are overshadowed by the reality that fewer students are completing their education. An educated society is the cornerstone of our future, Mr. Speaker, and this drop in matriculation threatens our collective progress. Mr. Speaker, as I continue to reiterate that a fact gains meaning when placed within a larger context, I turn my attention to the budgetary allocation of the education sector. Though at first glance the dollar amount given to education is more than last year or the year before, the fact in context is that the compounding the issue of matriculation is the reduction in our investment in education, which has decreased as a percentage of the national budget from 15.6 to 12.4%. This decline in funding directly impacts our ability to provide quality education resources to our children, hindering their chances of success. Mr. Speaker, we must consider the rising rates of severe and moderate malnutrition in our country. Severe malnutrition has escalated from a rate of 0.1 to 0.5 from 2020 to 2024. Just to give us some context, Mr. Speaker, of what has taken place over the last 10 years on this issue of malnutrition, when APNU AFC got into government in 2015, severe malnutrition was at a rate of 0.6. We did the necessary work, created and implemented the right policies, and the malnutrition rate was reduced to a rate of 0.1 by 2020. What this means is that the policies and programs that we implemented effectively target the problem of severe malnutrition. However, since the return of the PPP, both our severe and moderate malnutrition rates have both gone back up from 0.1 to 0.5 and from 0.5 to 1.4 respectively. This, Mr. Speaker, when the Minister with responsibility for finance, and I'm sure the Minister of Education will come to tell us of how they have expanded the breakfast program across the country. Malnutrition directly affects cognitive development and learning capacity, further exacerbating the challenges our students face. This, Mr. Speaker, when there is so much chatter of the amount of food that is dumped after these myriad of events that happen throughout the year due to excessive ordering of food and a need to flaunt and brag, putting on a show for people while our children are going to bed hungry, must be recognized for the tragedy it is. It is imperative, Mr. Speaker, that we not only build schools and train teachers, but also address the underlying issues affecting our youth, including adequate funding for education and the nutritional health of our students. Mr. Speaker, efforts must be made to ensure that every child has the opportunity to thrive academically and physically, reversing this troubling trend and contributing to a more educated society. Mr. Speaker, as I turn my attention to the hard-working individuals who contribute to our national growth, specifically at this point our oil rig workers, it is imperative that we also prioritize the welfare of the individuals who make this industry thrive. Many of these dedicated individuals, Mr. Speaker, endure grueling work schedules, often working weeks at a time on the job, only to return home for the same amount of days without any financial compensation for their time off. This is not just a statistic, Mr. Speaker. It's a harsh reality for the Guyanese who sacrifice their physical well-being for the benefit of our economy. The backbreaking work they do on the rigs deserve recognition and, more importantly, proper compensation. The weight of this reality bears down on them, Mr. Speaker, causing anxiety and preventing them from recuperating fully during their well-deserved time away from labor. They should not have to scramble for jobs during their day-off days to survive. Instead, they deserve appropriate benefits, health benefits, paid time off, and fair compensation that reflects their valuable contribution to our economic landscape. They should receive compensation not only for the hours they toil, but also for the time they spend recuperating at home. We must ensure that they can live with dignity and without the stress of financial instability. Their days of rest ought to be just that, days to recuperate, to reconnect with their family, and to recharge for another rigorous stretch on the rig. It may be difficult for some of us to understand because if we are told the amount they make, it sounds like a lot more than other Guyanese are making. But when you divide it by the amount of time they spend on and off the rig, it would become clear that it's not as large as it appears. Mr. Speaker, as we navigate the oil industry, it is alarming to hear reports that Guyanese workers who are integral to our nation's progress may be subject to arbitrary salary limits. This not only undermines their contributions, but also raises serious questions about commitment to equitable economic growth. Each of our workers, regardless of nationality, deserves to be compensated fairly for their skills, dedication, and hard work. What compounds this issue, Mr. Speaker, is the unsettling reality that for the same roles, some non-Guyanese are reportedly being paid more than their local counterparts. This stark disparity creates divisions in our workplaces and a sense of injustice that resonates throughout communities. It is not just about wages, Mr. Speaker. It's about respect. It is about acknowledgement and valuing the labor of our own citizens. Guyanese workers have invested years of training and education and experience to contribute to our oil sector. They embody the spirit of our nation and its potential. To impose a cap on their salaries while allowing others to earn more for the same work is not only unfair, but detrimental to our unity and collective progress as a nation. It is crucial for us to demand transparency, fairness, and accountability from both our government and the oil companies. We need to ask, why should there be a ceiling on what a Guyanese can earn within their own land? Why should the measure of worth be dictated by nationality rather than skill and dedication? Mr. Speaker, I stand here today to implore the PP government and the Minister of Labour to enact comprehensive policies that ensure fair pay without discrimination, allowing every worker, Guyanese or otherwise, to thrive in a just environment. Our shared prosperity depends on the dignity and respect we afford to all who work in the oil industry. Mr. Speaker, I would like to now address a cornerstone of our governance system, the public service. It is a pillar, Mr. Speaker, that holds our society together. I have spoken year in and year out about the need for our public service servants to be treated more fairly, impacting everything from infrastructure development to essential services that our citizens rely on daily. The effectiveness of our public service hinges on a simple yet profound principle, the importance of professionalism in every role within it. As we stand at the crossroads of progress, Mr. Speaker, we must recognize the plight we face when unprofessional individuals are placed in positions of authority, when these individuals lack the knowledge, the experience, and competency necessary for their roles. It creates a ripple effect throughout the entire system. It places our dedicated professionals in a frustrating position, Mr. Speaker, as they are expected to report to those who may be ill-equipped to lead or understand the complexities of our operations. This dynamic not only hampers productivity, but also contributes to increased government wage bills without any tangible return on investment. When we fill our public service with individuals who do not have the requisite skills or understanding, We see projects stalled, deadlines missed, and an alarming lack of accountability. It becomes increasingly evident that the government's inability to complete projects on time is directly linked to a lack of professional management and oversight. Even when projects and programs are completed, Mr. Speaker, we often find that they do not have the substantive impact needed to benefit our communities. It is not enough to simply check off boxes. We need initiatives that resonate with and uplift our citizens. We need solutions that address real challenges and improve the quality of life for all. To foster a truly effective public service, Mr. Speaker, we must prioritize professionalism and meritocracy in our hiring practices. The public service should be a space where competence is valued above all else, where individuals are chosen based on their knowledge, experience, and leadership qualities, not their connections or affiliations, Mr. Speaker. Only then can we ensure a productive and efficient public service that can fully meet the needs of our citizens. The public service must no longer be seen, Mr. Speaker, as just a job for the sake of employment, but a sector that leads by example, a sector that drives innovation, a sector that demonstrates accountability. What we need from the Ministry of Public Service, Mr. Speaker, are reforms that elevate our public service, resulting in timely project completions and impactful programs that deliver real benefits to our communities. We owe it to ourselves, Mr. Speaker. We owe it to the citizens of this country and future generations to demand excellence within our public service. As we address the compensation of our public servants, Mr. Speaker, it is essential to reflect on the historical context of pay increases. Between 2015 and 2019, the APNU-AFC government managed to provide an impressive 77% salary increase, despite grappling with significant fiscal challenges, including the revitalization of a struggling Gaisuko, a cash-strapped NIS, and the issues within the rice industry. In contrast, we find ourselves now under the PPP government, which projects an expenditure of over $1.3 trillion this year, yet has provided our public servants a mere 39%. This includes the 8% adjustment this year through the GPSU agreement. This discrepancy is nothing short of a travesty, Mr. Speaker. Our public servants who have faced soaring costs of living alongside the rest of the Guyanese population deserve far more than what is currently being offered. The reality is that under the current government's watch, our economy has grown. We said that the economy has grown, the GDP is large, we're the highest economy in this hemisphere and all of that. And we're projecting a balance of payment surplus at $113 million US at the end of 2024. Given these circumstances, Mr. Speaker, it becomes increasingly difficult to understand why public servants are being undervalued. If former administrations, despite facing significant financial obstacles, could extend generous increases to public workers, what justification can be given for the lack of support from the current administration? Our public servants faithfully serve the communities. They faithfully serve the same ministers that are in here and only suggesting that they get 8%, often going above and beyond the call of duty, and they deserve to be compensated fairly and justly. This PPP government, Mr. Speaker, should reconsider its stance and demonstrate real commitment to the welfare of our public servants. Our society thrives when those who serve it are adequately supported and appreciated. They are the backbone of our nation, Mr. Speaker, and it is high time they receive a compensation package that reflects their contributions to our society. As I conclude, Mr. Speaker, I would like to end us off with a paraphrase of a statement made by the late Miles Monroe. As we find ourselves in the beginnings of another election season, I believe we find ourselves grappling with the following as a nation. Politics without principles. Politics without principle leads to a political culture that fails to produce true leaders. Instead, it nurtures deal makers who compromise their principles to please others, resulting in a loss of authentic leadership and the erosion of true influence. In this environment, we encounter pleasure without conscience, wealth without work, knowledge without character, where many intelligent individuals misuse their knowledge for destruction, business without morality, and science without humanity. Worship is devoid of sacrifice. When assessing whether we are leaders or whether someone qualifies as a leader, we should measure them against these 6 criteria. We have enough politicians, but what we need is leadership within politics. Many politicians, upon honest self-reflection, would realize that they are not genuine leaders. Rather, they are power-hungry individuals grappling with low self-esteem and poor self-concepts, attempting to compensate through their pursuit of power. There are too many politicians who fail to grasp the true essence of leadership, leaving the public searching for leaders among those who generally do not adhere to their own convictions. Politicians often focus on programs rather than a compelling vision, prioritize securing the next election over the welfare of future generations, and are preoccupied with promises rather than purpose. Consequently, they seldom discuss the concept of purpose, leaving the impression that politics is available for sale, rather than emphasizing authentic leadership. I pray, Mr. Speaker, that we understand what is at stake, and individually and collectively, we make the best decision for our people and future generations. I thank you.
Aye, aye. And now for the honorable member, Dr. Jennifer Westford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Allow me to lend my support to this 2025 budget. Mr. Speaker, redemption is at hand in this honorable house. Mr. Speaker, I was appalled to hear the honorable member, Tabitha Hali, former Minister of the Public Service, standing here and saying that our public servants needs to be treated better. Mr. Speaker, this very former minister, after just barely 3 weeks of being appointed a minister, dismissed without giving any reason the personnel and the accounts staff. Mr. Speaker, how good they love our public servants. How they love the public servants. Mr. Speaker, and you know what the investigation unearthed? That the honorable member acted without due process, and it was an overuse of power. Mr. Speaker, our public servants have always been treated with respect and regard. Mr. Speaker, by the PPPC, since we came in 1992, we have never disrespected the public servants. Neither have we dismissed anyone. Mr. Speaker, in 2020, many of our public servants cried bitter tears when they were dismissed without even saying why. They were just told. And I'm not sure, sir, I can't recall. Sir, can you please advise me if the word thugs are in that list that you would have placed there? Is it, sir? No, it's not.
I advise you not to use it.
Sir, I'm not referring to anyone in this honorable house as a thug. They were just dragged out of some of the ministries by the thugs that are associated or were associated with the administration,
Speaker.
which was the APNU
Mr.
administration.
Speaker.
Some of them couldn't even remove their properties.
Mr.
They
Honorable Dr. Westford, we have the Honorable Annette Ferguson on her feet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand on standing order 40A. And 40A is saying here, by rising on a point of order, when the member speaking shall resume his or her seat, and the member interrupting shall simply direct attention to the point which
Honorable Dr. Westford, you may continue.
Mr. Speaker, I think that was meant as a little distraction. But I'm not being distracted. Mr. Speaker, I think it was very disrespectful, and the honorable member, Mr. Henry, had asked for the Minister of Amerindian Affairs to apologize to the Amerindian youths. I want to ask the honorable member who spoke before me to apologize to our public servants. How can the honorable members stand in this house and accuse our public servants of not being placed in positions and they're not qualified? It's disrespectful to our hard-working public servants, sir. And I think an apology should be made to those public servants. Or the minister must bring the proof to show who are those unqualified public servants that we have in positions. Mr. Speaker, you know, there's a saying that when you tell a lot of untruths, you yourself start believing that it's the truth. Because this attitude of placing persons, unqualified persons in positions, it's not a PPP trend, sir. It is not. Mr. Speaker, during the period 2015 to 2020, sir, it was appalling the amount of unqualified persons that were placed within the public service. And you know what happened? Do you know what they did? They placed those people on the pensionable establishment, knowing it was difficult to remove a pensionable worker. Sir, the evidence is there. We have the qualifications of those persons who, some of them today, it's difficult for us to get out of the public service. But what we have been doing, sir, we have given a lot of them the opportunity of upgrading themselves. And I must say, kudos to a lot of them. They have taken up the challenge and they have upgraded themselves or are currently upgrading themselves, thanks to the programs implemented on the goal by the PPPC. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member spoke about the public servants and their salaries and their allowances. I think the member needs to be updated a bit. Yes, there were salary increases on the APNU over the period 2015 to 2020. But there was nothing done for allowances, sir. Sir, on the 10th of December 2024, a landmark agreement was signed between the government and the Guyana Public Servants Union. And that agreement was spearheaded by none other than the Honorable Senior Minister of Finance and Public Service, Dr. Ashni Kumar Singh, sir. And sir, may I say at this forum that there was no Sir, I'm thinking because I don't want to say any words that you will stop me on. Mr. Speaker, there were no promises as happened with the teachers' negotiation a few years before that, in 2019. There were no promises by the government to any of the public service unions reps to come as to parliament. There were no proposal otherwise to any of them for from any member of the government. We negotiated in faith, in good faith, and that negotiation, sir, has yielded results that are beneficial to the public servants. Mr. Speaker, it's not only the salary increases that this agreement speaks to. There have been increases in traveling allowances, increases in housing allowances, increases in car allowances. Mr. Speaker, you weren't going to work. You had to go to work. You were skiving. You were malingering. That's the word. Mr. Speaker, risk allowances. Allowances that indeed our public servants have been clamoring for changes in. And Mr. Speaker, I dare say all of our public servants are not a category that are placed in a bunch and they do not benefit. They benefit from every other method that is mentioned in this budget. The public servants benefit like each and every one of us. They will also benefit, their children will benefit from the Because We Care grants. They will benefit from the cash grants. They will benefit from the free toll system. Mr. Speaker, they will benefit from the $10,000 that you will get for each child rebate. Mr. Speaker, they will benefit from the $100,000 when you get a child. All of that they stand to benefit from. And more so, today, our public service is probably one of the most qualified. So I can stand here and tell you today, we have persons who are clerks, who are studying for their master's degree as I speak, sir. And this is not randomly. Right at the parliament, sir, you know how many persons are studying there. All because the opportunities have been created by this PPPC government. We have created the opportunities, the level playing field that anyone, and how we do it, sir, if you want to get to a higher education, we will start you from the lowest level that you're capable of starting from. And we guide you and we bring you up to whatever level. The skies are the limit where we are concerned now. So when the honorable member stood there and spoke about education, we are educating our nation. And you know why? We want them to work with us. We don't want people who wouldn't understand when we are kerfuffling about a word that you have on your list, sir. I don't think so. We don't want people when we kerfuffle them with those grassmatic figures that we heard from our very first speaker in this house. We want them to understand this and must know that we are trying to make them look stupid. And that is why we want an educated nation, sir. Sir, there is another issue. Health. The honorable, the honorable member, Miss Tabitha Halley, Mrs. Sarabo Halley, went to the health sector. And I think she was just parroting a word I heard from higher up, from members who are supposed to be higher up in the APNU AFC, can't say the word cabal, hierarchy. The word malnutrition, sir. Sir, first of all, Mr. Speaker, and the good thing is that on the opposite side, we have a colleague medical doctor of mine who is aptly qualified. She's a public health professional. And I think maybe she should give some lessons over there about malnutrition, the word malnutrition, what it means. But in our sense of the word, when a Guyanese, when you hear somebody here says malnutrition, they're speaking about those ravishing photographs that we see emanating from around the world with some children with 2 fine legs, a big stomach, 2 big eyes, and some of them can barely stand. That's what we think about. Extreme. Malnutrition denotes either undernutrition or overnutrition. Undernutrition or overnutrition, both are deemed malnutrition. Mr. Speaker, we have an issue. We have an issue of overnutrition in this country. It is actually becoming an epidemic in this country right now. We have an issue where we cannot get our parents and our guardians to stop overfeeding children. We have programs. Mr. Speaker, I am not going to deny that there may be sporadic here and there, because this is a large country, and there may be, within the health sector, you may find some child who is suffering with some other condition who would display malnourished. Just looking at figures, my dear, you need to interpret. Interpretation is an art, and it's not something. Education doesn't mean interpretation. It's very, very difficult for some people. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you, there are very few people in this room today who knows what malnutrition is and what it was in this country. Mr. Speaker, I have Dr. Frank Anthony here, Dr. Vishwa Mahadio. We have the Honorable Member Gail Teixeira. Many doctors. And maybe there are some others here who might know. Mr. Speaker, oh, we have Dr. Berry Ramsaran, sorry. Yes. Mr. Speaker, I can stand here and speak about it. I worked in every single region of this country of ours. Every single region. Every single region. And we had those issues in every single region. But worst of all, it was so bad, sir. It was not under the PPPC. It's not under PPP either. Because we never had, Mr. Speaker, it was so bad in Georgetown, in Region 4. It was so bad that you had a special ward, a special children's ward for malnutrition. And Mr. Speaker, anybody with a conscience who weren't a medical practitioner and was accustomed to seeing those things would have cried and fallen down. Mr. Speaker, this lasted from the 1980s until that ward was abolished in the latter half of 1993.
Honorable member, I can agree with you because I did C-Rex to deal with that. We will need to give you an extension to continue to complete.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask for the honourable member to be given another 5 minutes to conclude her presentation.
Honorable member, you may continue.
Speaker, don't be afraid. Some of my other colleagues will continue where I will leave off. Mr. Speaker, I have to speak on this malnutrition thing. It is something that continues to rear its head every single budget. Every single budget. And no one is taking, I think they know exactly what they're saying, but they're just being facetious is a bad word, sir? No, it's not. You don't have that in your list. Mr. Speaker, I'm telling you, it was very bad. We, the PPPC, we diminished the malnutrition levels to such a level that there was no need for that ward any longer. We had special nurses as malnutrition nurses, sir. But you know what? You know what, sir? I think the time has gone for we to see them white mouth picnic, but them accustomed to seeing. That was the terminology that used to be used. They were looked at as inhuman, not human. It was very bad. So, sir, I would ask my colleagues on the opposite side and their associates to stop trying to land and put it as if we created malnutrition. Mr. Speaker, we have such good programs now. We have our MCH programs, our vaccination program. Look at our figures. It's second to none in this region, sir. Second to none. We have programs, we have nutritional programs, not only for our babies. It starts from the mother. From the pregnant mother, we start our nutrition because we want to ensure that we have healthy persons, healthy people in this country, because we want a healthy nation. And all of our policies, sir, are geared towards a healthy, prosperous nation. Mr. Speaker, so when people stand here and speak about no education, no food, I heard the honorable member, Mr. Henry, spoke about people hungry and people walking. I don't know where he's living if people are hungry, but he doesn't seem to be hungry. So we have to be careful he's not eating all the food from the others. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that this government, our policies are geared at ensuring that this country, that every single man, woman, child, that they have a prosperous, healthy life. And Mr. Speaker, no amount of misinformation as is being peddled by my friends on the opposite benches and no, I wouldn't say surrogates. I think that's in the list. And their associates, no amount of that will deter us from what our aims are, sir. We will continue this trend of development. We will continue moving forward, and this country will be a country, and as the Honorable Mia Motley said, we are going to be Little Dubai or Big Dubai one day. We are going to ensure that we love our people, they're our people, we are in the government, and we are going to be here to implement such policies and better policies for the next 2 decades, sir. So those who are dreaming about being here after this year, keep dreaming. Probably we'll give you some pillows and some blankets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Honorable member, let's take a break for another 40 minutes for some nourishments.
We are a peaceful people. Struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble. Just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one karage, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here, and they lived and died here, and we ain't